it's ironic that it goes from this sub-label to Relient K is the most successful thing Goatee's ever had as far as combined sales, you know? So that's kind of how that story started. They were friends with my daughters.
Welcome to Church Jams Now, the podcast where three former youth group kids and current music nerds deep dive into Christian music from the 90s and 2000s. I, of course, am your co-host, Kylan Savage. And with me, I get to say again, as always, is Mr. TJ Smith.
Hey, man, I'm feeling relatively sleepless 3 hours south of Seattle.
There you go. I'm so glad you're back, TJ. This is, we've missed you.
Thanks, man. It's great to be back. You'll notice I'm a couple beats behind everybody else. I think we talked about this. I don't remember whether it was on mic or not.
Well, we can blame it on the Zoom. Just blame it on
sure.
Zoom lag.
B2B here.
Yeah.
Island.
Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. We also have beautiful producer Josh Olson.
Hey, guys. TJ, I just want to say who I am, hates who I've been on the show, not having you here with us. So,
oh, nice.
Glad to have you back.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it, man.
And guys, we have a very special returning guest. He was on our Polarity episode with the wedding.
That was so much fun.
Oh my God, it was so much fun. And we have so much more to talk about. Of course, we have Mark Lee Townsend on the show. Mark, thank you so much for coming back on.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. Should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. I don't know what we're gonna do. We're gonna vibe out.
Go everywhere.
We're just hoping for an average time tonight. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Yeah, that's the goal.
So, Josh, I want to give it over to you as our beautiful producer. You're the one that kind of set this up. So I think you should maybe give us an idea of like what we're going to do tonight.
Yeah, where are we going with Mark tonight?
Yeah,
Josh?
well, last time on the Polarity episode, Mark gave as brief as his history in music could be, where he mentioned small bands that he's associated with, like Steve Taylor, DC Talk, Relient K, whatever, and we just had to like kind of like look past and be like, cool, thanks, Mark. Now just let's move on. Yeah, that was and we talked about on that episode that was like literally the hardest thing for me to be like, I want to just sit here and hear more about all of that. So that's what this opportunity is here to do. So we can go a little bit more in depth of Mark's history in music and some of the artists that you played with, and then also eventually finding our way into your production career as well, and some of the artists that you've worked on, maybe talking about some specific records. We talked about this before. Mark has a really poor memory about remembering really specific details on literally every record.
That's what the Google's for, you know?
No, you remember so much. So I'm excited just to see what we can be like, this record, what do you remember? And then you can just, I'm excited to be surprised on all the details that you can pull out all these years later. So that's kind of what I'm thinking for the roadmap for this episode. So we can just spend some more time. It was cool talking to the wedding guys, but now we can just talk to Mark, you know?
Yeah. Exactly. Am I correct in thinking we're going to get like a proper like origin story from Mark a little bit? Like,
oh, sure.
That's
anywhere you want to go.
Part of the pod, right?
That's what I'm hoping for. So, okay, every time we have people on, we always like to start with origin stories. Very specifically, what was the music that you grew up listening to? What was some of the first music that you bought that you felt like you owned as your music? And then how did you get into like being a musician?
That for me, that's actually a pretty easy thing and probably similar to a lot of people's story. I had two older sisters growing up. My parents had me later on in life. So my dad was 43 when I was born. He was World War II generation. My mom was 7 years younger than him. And I had two older sisters. And the funny part is my sisters, for all my life, gave me this thing, you know, because one's 13 years older than me, the other's 10 years older. And, you were a mistake. You know what I mean? That's the crap I was getting from my sisters. And I remember one time asking my dad later on in life, and I said, Dad, let's settle this once and for all. Okay. Right. It's like, what's the deal? And he goes, no, actually, you were the only one that was planned for. And apparently, my dad and my mom decided to try one more time to get a boy because my dad wanted a boy, and it worked out for him. But I was able to throw that back at my sisters.
A solid clap back.
Yeah. You thought you guys were the mistakes.
I love that I always ask about origin stories, and this is like the first time on the show we've gotten like
as a true origin story.
Origin story.
Yes.
And the reason I bring that up is because of my sisters being older than me and buying records. I was exposed to some really great music at a young age, nice. and they had a bunch of albums and stuff. And so I got Beatles stuff, which I mean, hard to argue with that, as far as getting songs in your head and the quality of it. I mean, who can argue with the Beatles? I mean, that's like the benchmark for most music that's rock and pop for the last 60 years, So I got
what
that.
What format was that, Mark?
Vinyl.
Awesome.
Absolutely straight up vinyl. Yeah. And
that's the best.
I still have some of those same records today. I ended up with them. So I've got some of that vintage vinyl, and I'll pull them out from time to time. But I got loads of Beatles and a lot of music at that era. Beatles, Stones, Motown, things of that nature. And then my middle sister had a lot of the music of the 70s. So I ended up with everything from Neil Diamond, as weird as that sounds, to, I mean, just a wide range of stuff that was on the radio, stuff that was creative. Carole King, a lot of things that the Wrecking Crew played on. You guys are probably familiar with the Wrecking Crew,
Yes.
Yep.
And I got loads of that. And what the big significant thing, I came from a musical family, but none of them really did anything except sing. They were all really good singers, but they wouldn't do anything outside the context of the church. And my parents were both great singers, but they wouldn't do anything outside of the context of the church choir. But bringing it around, found out when I was 6 years old, my oldest sister started dating this guy who played guitar. He played acoustic and sang, and he was in a band and stuff. And then him and my sister started singing together in coffee houses and stuff. Well, they'd come over to our house and rehearse, and I would just sit in front of him and watch him play guitar. It just started kind of memorizing, his hand positions. And then when he would leave, my dad had an old beater acoustic, an old Silvertone that he had laying around the house. And I would pick that up and emulate it. And at 6 years old, I was playing acoustic guitar, and I had an aptitude for it. And you got to remember, this is the era way before YouTube, where you can go on YouTube and get lessons in anything. That didn't exist. And by the time I was 8, I was really good on acoustic guitar. I was better than he was. And I just had an aptitude for it. And I remember in elementary school, here I am, the first kid, first musician I ever played with was a guy at school that played snare drum, African American kid. It was awesome, and we played in the school, like backing up the kids in the school singing, and I played an acoustic guitar with him through an amp, and he played snare drum, and the teacher played piano, and I was doing that 4th and 5th grade.
That is amazing.
The guitar's bigger than you, like
yes. Oh gosh, I've got pictures. I've got a picture that my sister snapped, and I was like 7 years old, and I had my brother-in-law's big Harmony, big body acoustic. And dude, I'm reaching over the top, trying to.
Oh, that's so good.
Can barely touch the strings,
but I could play all that stuff. And what I found out too was I had a knack for picking stuff off of records. So I was able to, like, by the time I was in junior high, I was playing my sister's records. I could play all these Beatles songs. I could play these Carole King songs on guitar. I could play that sort of thing. And then I started getting into my own music, in junior high. So of course I was hearing some really good rock and roll from that era. It just really picked up on it. Oddly enough, I didn't catch things like Zeppelin and some of those things till later in life, because I grew up in a pretty conservative Christian home. It wasn't, my parents didn't say, don't listen to that devil music. I never dealt with any of that. But my sisters weren't, they didn't really listen so much to Zeppelin and stuff. They listened to more things that were on AM radio at the time, So when I discovered all those things in high school, it's like I couldn't get enough, of all that stuff,
You kind of drank from a fire hose at that point in your life.
Pretty much.
Making up for lost time.
Pretty much. And started my first band was something at school in 6th grade, and it was put together by the band teacher. And he said, anybody want to audition and stuff? And so here I am with my acoustic guitar and an amplifier, and these 8th graders, and they're playing Smoke on the Water, and I'm learning off of them and stuff. But I was just this nerdy kid that couldn't get enough of that. And I had the aptitude, as I said, I had this musical aptitude in this ear, to be able to hear things and pick them out when a lot of my classmates couldn't, and that's my whole life has been that. It's been listening and learning and remembering and identifying. And then I found out later in life, well, I have the perfect pitch thing of what they called it, to where I could, my 8th grade teacher would start hitting notes, and it's like, well, what note's that? And of course I was able to hear it, And that's the basis of all I do. I mean, still to this day, it's listening,
I mean, we just like pretty much breezed past the fact that you're like, in 4th grade, I was like playing along to Beatles records. And, and we're all just like
figuring out big Beatles records.
No, that is incredible, man. Like I
just had the aptitude,
Yeah,
it was kind of a gift. And
so then, I want to move into like, how did you start applying that gift as like a viable career choice for you?
How did it start moving into that? Yeah.
Or even like a passion that sort of felt like it was yours and not like the band teacher having you audition for something, but like you were maybe like taking the reins a little bit in your own right.
I got to be honest with you. That happened really early. I mean, like 8 years old. I mean, I knew what I wanted to do.
So you were actually like the puppet master behind the whole thing.
I wanted to be the Beatles. It's funny. You guys probably have no idea, but there was a TV show on in the 1960s called The Monkees. And they were,
we know.
They were basically, it was crazy because there were 4 actors that were from different parts of the country, and they were put together to kind of do an American Beatles, but they really, but it wasn't Beatley at all. They were almost more their own thing. And the funny thing is, within 6 months, they kicked out to producers and became a real band, But the guy that was the guitar player in that band, his name was Mike Nesmith. He passed away a few years ago. He wore a wool hat. And I wanted to be him so bad. I just thought he was like the coolest thing ever, not really realizing that they weren't the Beatles, that they were a TV band, But those were, that was the influence. And, when I got into junior high, of course, as I said, you pick up on Deep Purple, you pick up on Sabbath, you pick up on different things like that. Anything and you also pick up on the whole other end. By the time I was in high school, disco was around, and I liked Nile Rodgers, what he did in that disco band Chic. He was a really good guitar player. He played funky and clean, but he had just a great thing going with the Stratocaster. So I got that end of it, I just took in everything. I took in the radio. I took in the heart, the British metal stuff. I took everything in. And of course, in high school, Eddie Van Halen dropped. And when that first album came out, that was life changing for me. I had to figure out how to 2-hand tap and everything else. And I did. I worked my butt off. And then I picked up Steve Lukather from Toto, who is just a crazy great guitar player. And he became a hero of mine. Pat Benatar's husband, Neil Giraldo, He was a guitar player on all those records she did. Dude, he was a monster player, still is. I mean, he's still playing. But I took in, because I wasn't a snob, I took in anything, everything. And then, of course, you pick up the punk stuff from like the Sex Pistols, the Ramones with all the downstrokes. And for me as a guitar player, I was one-dimensional, and I just wanted to learn anything, everything. I didn't discriminate, which was funny because when I played in bands in high school and stuff, a lot of the other bands, disco sucks. I mean, it's a cliche.
Like cults of genre.
Yes.
You saw the dividing lines as just like absurd. You're like, no, I want it all.
I wanted to learn everything. And by the time I was in high school, my last years of high school, I was doing sessions in studios around Columbus, Ohio, where I'm from. And I was always the youngest guy in there. I did sessions where I was the only white guy there because I could play funky stuff, but I could also rip a Van Halen type solo. So I'd end up playing on doing those things at a really young age. And there were still growing pains. I wasn't anywhere near a finished product, but I had good rhythm. I could play in tune. My tone sucked because I didn't have money for good gear, back then. You're playing PV stuff or, things like that. But yeah, just work my way up. And at that point, when I hit high school is when the tunnel vision came in, and a lot of the battles with my parents, and God forgive me for the way I treated my parents back then, but I just had tunnel vision, man. It's like, no, I'm going for it. I'm doing it. There's nothing getting in the way. And I was very blessed that God allowed that to happen because, man, I was blockheaded, man. I mean, I was blockheaded. I mean, I threw, when I realized I had bandmates that weren't as serious as I was, man, it's like, don't have time for you later. I'm moving on.
Yeah.
I was so driven and so blockheaded,
So were you in groups that were like trying to be serious bands, or were you more,
we thought
did you see yourself more as like a session player?
No, both. I did sessions, but I always wanted to be in a band. I always wanted to be in the Beatles. That was just four guys that had a blast and loved music and complimented each other and were different and were funny and quick-witted. That's what I always wanted to be. But I ended up learning the session musician mentality and the tones and the styles and the melodies and things. I said Lukather was a huge influence on me. Jay Graydon, some of those LA session guys, to a certain degree. So I went through a phase of that overall. But at the end of the day, I always loved the British blues guys.
Yeah.
Jeff Beck was my all-time favorite player.
Right.
Because he was just clever just did things that nobody else did. Those guys, Beck, Clapton, Jimmy Page, those were like my roots influences because I loved the blues thing with it too,
Right.
But I'm not really that discriminate as a guitar player. I like a lot of different everything and have stolen through it all the years.
Yeah, no, I think that's ended up being like an incredible asset, right? Like,
it's a superpower.
Yeah, exactly. Like you've never been, at least from our perspective, being so much younger and seeing the records that you've been involved in is like you've never been like pigeonholed as this kind of sound guy, right? Like you were just like you're just a music guy. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I try to be. The hardest part for me and what kind of threw my career sideways at the end, and it happened towards my later high school years, was discovering a guy named Todd Rundgren. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Todd Rundgren at all.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
I said, for those of you're on your podcast that don't know, he would have been the 70s equivalent of Prince or Lenny Kravitz.
Right.
He was a guy that played guitar, but he played a ton of different instruments. He wrote, he sang, he engineered his own records, and he mixed his own records. And he was doing it in the early 70s. And I just was so blown away by that concept back then that's what I went for. So I kind of, even though I continued to play guitar, my interests were, I no longer wanted to be Eddie Van Halen. I wanted to be Todd. I wanted to learn to play keyboards. I wanted to learn to play bass. I wanted to learn to play drums. I wanted to learn all these, which I did.
Right.
The diverse skill set that kind of helps you just like go deeper into musical creation, right?
Absolutely. And as a producer, it was absolutely invaluable to learn the language and to learn back then what people did, because this was before everybody had Logic, X on a Mac and just farted around with keyboards that had auto tune and everything else. It's like, no, you really had to know how drums worked, how to mic them properly, how to make them sound like something. Oh, you've only got 2 tracks? Oh, okay. Well, I guess we got to do a stereo mix of the drums and get everything right and put it on 2 tracks. I came up in a different era, and I was really leaning towards that. And then when I got out of high school is when the opportunities opened up for me to join different groups, sign record deals. And it's, I guess I'm a guitar player again. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I hung my hat on that clear up until I got out of DC Talk. That's what I was pretty much full on guitar player producing on the side. And then when DC Talk retired, and that's when I became production, full time.
Well, okay, this is actually like a perfect transition. Let's talk about the DC Talk of it all. Right?
Okay,
like,
sure.
Well, there's a little bit more that happened before then too.
There is, but I'll give you the quick lead up to the DC Talk thing. So, what happened? I mentioned that I was doing session stuff in Columbus at different studios. Okay, a friend of mine, I worked with a family band at the time and was playing on a record for them at a really, really great studio. And it was a family band. They were never signed. They were out of Columbus, called the Hitches. And it's funny because they had a horn section, they had singers, it was just kind of this big thing. And my buddy was a bass player in it. And he was doing stuff in Atlantic City, and doing show band stuff and things of that nature. Well, we made this record and it sounded great. It was engineered by a guy named Jim Dutt, who was just really top-notch engineer. It was just a really great sounding custom record. And my friend knew this band through a girlfriend, and he was in Atlantic City, and so he goes there to hang out with these people, with this band. They were like kind of a new wave band that was really cool, and they were Christians and stuff. And so he goes there and he's playing a cassette of rough mixes of this record for these guys in this band. And, because he's a really great bass player, still is to this day. And they kept going, "Who's the guitar player?" Well, it was me. And, nice. and so long story short is through that, and which I want to share real fast, some tough things. And one of the worst, the toughest was at 20 years old, my mom passed away, which is real. And she had been in bad health, but that really, I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have had parents pass away, but especially at a young age like that, it really rocks your world, even if you're putting on a brave face. At the time, I wasn't, I believed in the Lord, but I wasn't walking it, you know what I mean? And I just was it really rocked my world. And the cool thing is a couple months after that, God led me back to him, which was great in a very wonderful, gentle way. So at that point, I was kind of like, okay, well, God, what do you want? Not to over spiritualize, you know what I'm saying? And right about that time is when I got contacted by this band out of Philadelphia, and they're kind of like, well, we need a guitar player, and we think you're it. And I'm
like, you had traveled to Philadelphia?
I actually went to Cincinnati, Ohio to see them play. They were playing a show. Me and my buddy went. And they get done with the show, and they take afterward. They bring me up on stage and they hand me a guitar and want me to jam with them. So I did for 5 minutes. It wasn't anything amazing, but it was fun. And then they take me out to they had an old rickety Greyhound bus kind of thing, and they took me out there and said, "Well, we need a guitar player, and we think you're it."
And just like that.
It was
5-minute audition.
Incredible. And at that point, I told them no, because having my mom pass away, my dad, I didn't want to leave my dad, as weird as that sounded,
Sure. Yep.
went back home, and they said, well, they go, will you at least pray about it? Sure. No problem. Will do. And so I did. And, got to talking with and they kept calling like every, like 5 days. Hey, how you feeling? How's it going? This and that, and the other. And I told my dad, and I told my dad, I said, Dad, I really don't want to leave you. I know that Mom's gone, and I know that's an adjustment for you. And he goes, you've been wanting to do this all your life. What are you talking about? It's, if God gives you peace, it's a no brainer. So I joined them. And 6 months later, we had a record deal on Murr Records, which is the word. It was in the word system. Amy Grant was the top of the heap. This band I was with called Bashing the Code out of Philly, we were the bottom of the heap, but it was a real record deal. And it was during the era of drum machines, samplers, keyboard sequencing, and all the pop records. Bands typically weren't doing a bunch of records in the pop world then. It was all programmed by a producer. Tears for Fears, a lot of that stuff, all that stuff. Scritti Politti, ABC, all the bands from that era. It was all programming, And this guy named Dan Huff, who is an unbelievable guitar player and an unbelievable country producer, just a legendary guy. He played on all the albums back then. It didn't matter who you were. It's like, the producer produced the music, and programmed it. And then here comes Dan Huff to do all the guitars. And so I just figured that was going to be the case. Well, I was shocked when the record label and the A&R guys go, no, you're playing on the record, because we had done some demos. So I'm a 21-year-old kid, playing on a quote unquote major label Christian record, and I was up to the task because I had done session work, and that, as weird as it sounds back then, playing everything with a machine was a pretty new technology, especially for a guitar player. Everything was right on the nuggets time wise, and I had to be. Well, I was actually up to the task. That's what kind of set me on the path. I made a couple records with them, got out of that band, played with some other people, and eventually ended up with a guy named Steve Taylor, who is kind of, I always call him kind of the godfather of Christian alternative music. Yeah. Because he was really clever. And of course, he went on to produce Sixpence None the Richer. He did a bunch of Newsboys records, but he's always done really creative stuff. And of course, he had a general market deal with a band called Chagall Guevara that was signed to MCA back in the day. But I was with him for a few years, and DC Talk saw me play, and they needed another guitar player. The guy they had, Brent Barkus, great player, more of a pop guy, in that sense. And they just wanted another guitar player, especially somebody that had kind of was capable of a loosey-goosey rock background, and just, I had hair down the back of my butt, and,
that guy.
And I was really into the alternative, and I hate to say the grunge thing, but I mean, call it what it is. I was into I was into Pearl Jam, I was into Stone Temple Pilots, of course Nirvana. I mean, all that stuff. Soundgarden. I was into all of it, and I knew how to play the stuff. But I could also do the session stuff. I could also do the pop Stratocaster stuff. So anyhow, they ended up hiring me. Kind of a funny story I'll tell real quick on the front of this, what actually happened. I didn't know it, but they were pretty settled with me being in the band. And once again, I didn't assume anything. They said, well, why don't you come down to Nashville? I was living in Ohio at the time. And why don't you come down to Nashville and jam with us, see how it works out. Okay, so I learned a bunch of the tunes, go down there, we go to like SIR or one of those places, set up, and I'm playing with them, and I'm sitting there going, it's fine. I mean, it wasn't, the stuff I had to do wasn't life changing. What I mean by that, it wasn't like the hardest thing at all, but I did okay. Yeah. I walked away from it going like, I know I could do the gig, but I didn't necessarily feel like I did anything special, So
it didn't light you up.
No, and I got everybody was great. I mean, all the band guys and Toby Mike Kever, they were all great. I mean, just,
for sure.
Wonderful. They were awesome people. But so I go back up to Ohio, and I'm not hearing anything back from them, and I'm kind of like, okay, well, what's the deal on that? And this is, I'm really dating myself, but this is before cell phones. This is before I even had a cell phone, before the Nokia came up,
Yeah.
This is mid 90s, So I get so I keep missing the manager, Dan Pitts. We're totally, just missing each other. This goes on for like days. So finally, me and my wife go out. I just say, bag it. We're going out on a date. And my oldest daughter, Danielle, was home. And I just said, if Pitts calls, tell him, am I in or out? Period. That's all I need to know. Okay. Is it a go or is it not? So we go out on the date. When I come home, he actually calls. And I go, hey, Dan, man, good to catch up to you. I'm not trying to wear you out. I just am trying to. He goes, yeah. What can I do for you? And I said, I just, do I have the gig? And he goes, do you have the gig? Of course you had the gig. It's like you had the gig when you left the audition. It's like
shoot.
He goes, I thought you knew that. And I said, no, nobody told me. And he goes, dude, the keyboard player started packing up when after you got done playing, and because I figured they had to audition a couple other guys, and I think they actually did just out of a courtesy. And he goes, I thought you knew.
Wow.
So I had
just
the gig
totally
for
lost in translation.
Yeah, I had the gig for 2 weeks, and I didn't know I had the gig. So then I hooked up with him, and the rest is history. Kind of.
Kylan, I've got a band that you may not be very aware of. They're kind of underground.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Have you ever heard of this band from Canton, Ohio called Relient K?
I have not, but I have heard of the pizza place in the Philippines. That's a really deep cut.
It's a really deep cut.
Shout out to Sadie Hawkins Pod.
Yes, Danny and Jess know all too well. Wow, very deep cut. Well, I'm glad you know about the pizza place. There's also a band called Relient K.
Oh, cool.
And at this point in their career, they have a good amount of records. And a lot of those records, LPs and CDs, can be found at our sponsor, colliderecords.com.
No way.
This year was a big year. We had the 20th anniversary of and guess what? They have the vinyl of that. It was also the 15th anniversary of Forget and Not Slow Down, and they have that on vinyl. Hot take, 2 best Relient K records. Not in that order, though, in my opinion. But they've got, we'll talk about that later. But they got a lot of other Relient K vinyl and some CDs in there still. If you're a CD guy like me, they got a lot of great stuff. So if you like Relient K, Collide Records is the place for you.
For real. Unfortunately, at this point, I don't think they offer pizza deliveries, but in lieu of that, you can pick up,
there's a comment section you could put in there, maybe
true.
They're looking to expand their business. Yeah.
That's true. We should definitely talk to Greg about that.
Yep.
Have we got an idea for him? But yeah, man, I think if you're the kind of person that is not format phobic, right? Like if you like all kinds of different formats, I think on their site, I think you can pretty much fill out the entire or a vast majority of the Relient K discography.
Yeah, and definitely some stuff that's still hard to come by these days. So another thing to shout out, they have the Air for Free vinyl, which has the fun alternate track list that's vinyl exclusive as well.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they kind of altered the track list for it. So
interesting.
You can get a different listening experience on vinyl as opposed to streaming or CD. So
nice.
Yeah, but if you go to Collide Records and you get all the Relient K that you can imagine to bundle up and put it in your cart, I've got some good news for you.
Do you have to use your fingers?
You have to use your fingers. And when it comes to the promo code, you can type in Church Jams Now, all one word, and you will receive not 1, not 5, not 10, but 20% off your first order from colliderecords.com.
That's insane.
It's a great deal.
That is a great deal. So once again, use your fingers, type in promo code Church Jams Now at checkout at colliderecords.com to get all of your Relient K needs met, plus others. No pizza, though.
Not yet, at least. TBD.
Not yet.
But it was great. I did challenge them. There were multiple times in the gig where I felt like I overstepped some bounds looking at it in hindsight, and I really didn't.
With creative decision making?
Yeah, here's the funny part. Here's a classic example. With Steve Taylor, we did no tracks at all. It was like 2 guitars, bass, and drums, three guys singing and just rock and roll. We rehearsed it. It was tight, put on a big show. It was like a just really high energy thing, did a live album, but it was all about the feel, all about, we weren't against click tracks or playing with a click, but it was absolutely music has to be pure. Okay. So we were rehearsing with DC Talk up in Adrian, Michigan to get out of Nashville, because back then, especially, they just wanted to get away from the press and be able to actually rehearse. Okay. So the tour manager had found this high school up there, like a Christian school that had a hotel across the street, and they set up in the auditorium. And dude, there's a Clare Brothers. They bring in a Clare Brothers PA system. I mean, it's like, this is like, serious pre-production rehearsal, right? Wow. So I drive there from Ohio. Everybody else in the band's from Nashville, and I come in and I'm meeting everybody, and it's winter time, snowing out, and hey, how you doing? Just I'm Mark, and they all know about me or whatever, but they're, I'm just talking with them, and I notice the keyboard player is loading up background vocal samples in a sampler in his keyboard rack. And the gall of this is how out of line I was, but I'm seeing red because I'm going with this ethos that music has to be pure. You can't have background vocal samples. It has to be pure, Yeah. So I go and talk to each guy in the band. It's like, keyboard player, do you sing? Yeah, I sing. Other guitar player, yeah, I sing. Bass player, yeah, I can sing a little bit. Percussion guy, yeah, I can carry pitch. That whole thing, and I sang. Okay, so we get done setting up. They have a cafeteria in there in this school where they catered in some food. It was a Sunday night, and so everybody's getting to know me and get to know each other, that kind of thing. And I'm sitting next to Toby, and they're just asking me questions of what it was like with Steve Taylor, and this and that, and the other. And Toby goes, "Well, Mark, just what are some of your thoughts kind of coming into this?" Okay, this seriously came out of my mouth. This is how ridiculous I was back then. I go, you know what? I think it's ridiculous that you guys are using background vocal samples. He sings, he sings, he sings, he sings, he sings, and he sings. And I sing. And there's this awkward silence at the table.
Yeah, all the other guys in the band are looking at you like, hey, man.
There's this awkward silence. And finally, they start busting up into laughter, and I was dead serious. I mean, I was dead serious, and so it all got washed over in laughter. So we get done eating. We're walking up the hall, and Toby comes, puts his arm around me, and goes, "Townsend," he goes, we've been talking about getting off of background samples, for a while. You know what? We're gonna do it." And that whole tour, a Jesus Freak tour, had no backing samples whatsoever. Wow. And what would have been 2 weeks of just absolute easy rehearsal turned into a ton of work.
Yeah. Everyone had to quadruple their workload.
That's right. But we were so proud of ourselves. We were so proud of ourselves because so many of these other arena acts back then in Christian music were using tons of
leaning on it.
And this is before people used a laptop. I mean, this is when people were still using sequencers out of keyboards and samplers and either that or like ADAT tape machines and that whole tour. And what it did, it also gave us the ability on a lot of the rock stuff, like songs like It, Love It, Need It and Day by Day and stuff. We didn't have to deal with a click. I mean, we were able to freehand everything, and it was really rock and roll.
That's cool.
But yeah, I'm horrified by that now. And we were talking about that when we did the reunion cruises, and it was good natured, but in a real world, they should have just fired my butt.
It was the push
there.
they needed, you brought that outside perspective in.
That's what I find interesting, because it's like you were a little maybe like punching above your weight, but like. What I
was definitely punching above my weight.
Yeah. Oh, well, and good for you, because I think probably looking back, well, I guess I'll pose it as a question. Do you feel like the guys, the core three and the other players, do you feel like they gained a modicum of respect for you once they decided that was something worth pursuing, right? Like plucky Mark Lee Townsend over here, who's this guy with these big ideas? But later, like in hindsight, do you think that they were like, oh, like this guy really wants us to challenge ourselves, and he sees the potential in who we are and who we can be as a live act?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely peed in the Wheaties, but I think it really helped in the long run. Because the band up to that point were all really good players, but it was like, stay on your riser, do your parts. It was like a New Kids on the Block thing. It was like a pop act, and it was great that they were willing to go into the rock and roll thing just full head on, and full on with it,
Okay. So Mark, I know we don't know each other incredibly well, but I've listened to a lot of records that you've produced post this, and that kind of ethos, like as someone that is like a relatively objective, like third party, just listener, enjoyer of these other records, like that specific ethos comes through in everything that you produced after that.
I could totally see that. I mean, because that's the only way I know how to do things. I was very blessed, especially the years with Relient K, those guys being willing to go there. You know what I mean? Being willing to be challenged, and especially Thiessen. And what I mean by challenge, it isn't do that better or anything. No, it's just like, hey, what do you guys think about this? What do you think about the Beach Boys? What do you think about all these different things? And trying just really different guitar tones, and try, instead of just going for convention, not accepting form for form's sake, I've had that my whole life, and sometimes it's worked out and other times it hasn't. But I will say this. I look back on some things I've done in life and go, man, I can't believe I had the nuts to do that. But at the same time, I've never really burned relationships, and I still have relationships, good relationships with people, and I don't feel like anybody feels like I dragged them somewhere where they didn't want to go, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I feel like probably from what I've heard, it sounds like your approach, it has so much heart in it, even the way that you carry yourself.
Well, it has to.
And speak with us, on mic now. Like I hear your heart, and I feel like in any relationship, whether it's music or otherwise, it's like you're probably coming from that heart space, and so no one's gonna be offended, even if they disagree with you, right? Like you can respectfully disagree and not walk away, like you said, with having burned any bridges. And I feel like that's a big component to success. Not only your diverse, like broad range that you bring to the table as like a musician's musician, as a guy that loves bands, like in the classic
love
sense
bands,
of the word, but also
bands are the best thing.
Yeah. Because there's a diplomatic.
There's nothing better than
right?
playing in a band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it's all clicking, it's great.
Yeah. You've also clocked Mark's second superpower as a musician and a producer. Like like it's the musical acumen and the heart, right? Like the empathy,
the emotional intelligence. Yep.
Yeah.
It's got to be there.
A good example of how I work, I saw not too long ago, you guys went over the Run Kid Run record.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just came out.
And those guys are awesome. I mean, the one that me and Thiessen did with them, Thiessen was involved in all the writing process and stuff like that. And I probably dealt more with the sound shaping and guitar stuff and tones, and the typical thing, that era. And David is awesome. Neil, I mean, those guys are all just really, really awesome guys. And in the past, they had done some things with who was the guy out of Florida?
James Paul Wisner.
Yeah, exactly. And that guy has made just some awesome records.
Right.
But his approach is completely different than mine.
Yeah.
They played one guitar. They played one guitar through one single chain, no effects. And he added all the effects afterward. And I understand why he did it, because you could get a really level of control and make decisions after the fact and this and that and the other. With me, I've never felt great about that. It's like, no, let's just dial up an awesome tone. And if things get grainy and weird, it's meant to be grainy and weird. But and like with me, I brought tons of pedals. I brought a bunch of amps. I brought a bunch of guitars, into the studio. So those guys are able to play, and try some different things. Hey, why not play through my hollow body? I got an Epiphone Casino. I got a 335, an 80s 335. I've got just these different guitars and stuff. And to me, that should be fun for the band guys.
It's part of the process, right? To get it right from the start.
Absolutely.
And to have fun with that exploration process.
And I don't think they knew how to handle that level of freedom, you know, in that sense. And once again, as I said, Wisner's done some awesome stuff. I've always appreciated his stuff. I think he's a fantastic producer,
Sure.
But my MO, it's like, I like the weird stuff. I like the curveballs, Yes, I like big raging guitars. And back then, if it was a Mesa and a Marshall, great. That was just part of the thing.
Right.
But I also like the weird little thing in the corner out of my 60s Silvertone Twin 12 or my 1984 Seymour Duncan convertible amp, which is a weirdo, and it's just got a cool sound to it. And it's like, I like adding those parts in, and then, we'll do that sort of thing. And it's more time consuming to do stuff that way. I think the fastest record I ever cranked out was 13 days, and that was the last Supertones record. I think I'm trying to remember which one. I think it was called Revenge of the Supertones or something like that.
Yep.
Did it when I first moved to town, and those guys were talented, and so we were able to do it. But like, we literally got in, just hammered it, which was funny because like, came in way under budget because we just flew through it. And, I had to argue with Brandon Ebel. He was trying to come back and lowball me on some money. And it's like, dude, I just brought your album in way under budget. It's like, it's like, and don't get me wrong.
Scrimping.
I love Brandon. I always got along with Brandon, but it's,
but that was his job too, right? Like,
it was a little bit of
argue
Trumpism,
about those things.
it was a little bit Trumpism in the sense of lowball, and then work your way back up. And it's
right.
Just, and me and a manager buddy of mine is just like, nah, Brandon, okay, I get it if it went over budget or something, but it's like, nah, dude, I just saved you thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And it's like, don't split crosshairs with me. My fee's my fee, So, which is fun, but yeah, it's the heart of it. For me, it's the weird stuff. It's the Brian Wilson factor.
Yes.
Brian Wilson was willing to try things and mess with things. Todd Rundgren, same way. His 70s solo records, once you get past the first couple that sound like, Carole King type writing, a lot of piano stuff. When you get into his middle records, like A Wizard, a True Star, there's an album called Todd. They're just they're just really great pop writing, but artsy as heck. Just crazy, weird recorded drums. He was playing guitars through synthesizers, like actual
nice,
like Moog filters, not like MIDI. It wasn't a MIDI pickup. He was actually plugging guitar into Oberheim synth racks, and you get these weird, crazy, fun sounds. And it really works in the music because he had just these great songs, to go along with it. And I think that's where I pick up a lot of that idea, I don't
that desire to play,
but
to fight convention. Yeah.
Let's try anything. Let's try anything, everything. We did with Relient K, especially with the albums clear up to all those albums were done up in Ohio at my house, at my home studio. So we weren't really on the clock. And we just tried anything, everything. and until we got what we wanted to do. If we felt like going to the local college and getting a bunch of choir singers and setting up a couple mics and, Talia will buy you a pizza if you sing on that, that's what we did.
Yeah. Mark, you're
the
just
best.
so rad, dude. So, okay. I feel like we've done a really good job of sort of like transitioning from like the origins into the DC talk into Relient K a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to take a brief Jennifer Knapp detour. If
Sure,
that's okay
absolutely.
with everybody. I would love to know about your association with Jennifer Knapp and
Absolutely.
How,
Yeah.
like how you got involved with her.
Yeah, Jen is awesome. I knew her as a goatee artist when I was with DC Talk. And with DC Talk, they would go wall to wall for about a year and a half, and then they'd take a year off to write a record and kind of work on that. And so on the in-betweens with DC Talk, a buddy of mine was her manager. And so she was just starting to, she had opened for Talk on the Supernatural tour. She played right before us. And that was I think her first band thing that she had done.
Yes, you know what? I think I have a VHS of one of those performances that I
could
got
very well be
from the W's because I think they were also
they were
tour?
the first opener.
Yes,
that's right.
Yeah. So I have a
Nice.
VHS tape of that.
I remember that because the W's guys were awesome, and because they had a horn section, we brought them out for DC Talk's disco set.
Yes,
I actually did the charts for them.
Oh, nice! That's cool.
That's how I remember that because
cool.
did the arrangements. But so anyhow, she had done that whole thing, and she was asked to do some Lilith Fair dates.
Oh, cool!
And they wanted to put together a new band. And Steve knew me. He was a friend of mine, and he had called me up and said, "Hey, Jen's going to play these Lilith Fair dates. Do you mind playing guitar for him?" Sure. I mean, of course they paid me, but and so we did some rehearsals, and I brought my buddy who was DC Talk's drummer, Rick May, who has since passed away a couple of years ago, who is just one of my dearest friends ever. I brought him in the band as well, and then Tony Lucido was the bass player, and we worked up this stuff, and we killed it. I mean, we did these 4 Lilith Fair dates. It was right place, right time, and it went so well that I think we just kept going for the time being in between the talk stuff. And she was great. Jen always treated me really, really well. I mean, it was really special. That summer, we did some dates, and the person they had hired to do merch for them wasn't getting the job done, and so Steve asked my wife to come out on the road and do merch. Okay, nice. My two older daughters were already out of the house, and so we had was my youngest daughter, who she was probably only 12 or 13 maybe or something like that. Oh yeah, sure, she can come out on the road. So that summer we traveled and went out on the road, and it was just the batch of us on a bus and did a bunch of these dates and Cornerstone Festival and all these different festivals.
Right.
And it was great. And a great thing about Jen, she was not remotely intimidated by the players that were in her band, because the players in her band were all top notch. Okay. It wasn't like, hey, you stay there and do your thing and play the part the same way every night. She was like, bring it on. She couldn't get enough, and she just kicked butt on it. And it led to a lot of, over a course of a couple of years on the in-betweens of talk stuff, I would always do dates with her. And we even did, like, me and her, we did a Borders bookstore tour where it was just 2 acoustics. And it was great. I complimented what she did, and I'd carry a background vocal. She's so good. I mean, just especially during that era, she was just really, really good, and love Jen, just a lot of heart and stuff, and just had a great time with her.
Sweet. Yeah. I wanted to bring that up because I feel like, at least within our circles, like with you in particular, it's like DC Talk and Relient K are like the 2 big sort of monoliths,
right?
Which so like,
fact,
I wanted to at least address that period of time with her, because I think that's
absolutely
also super important.
Absolutely, no question. I said just a great talent, great songwriter. I haven't seen Jen in years, and just because once again I'm not in a touring circle anymore, and stuff. But just I've always loved Jen. She is just a great person. I love her a lot.
Awesome. Okay, I want to open it up to Josh and TJ. Is there anything specific we want to ask before we kind of move into the next section? I don't know. This feels really natural. Like, right? Like we're just kind of vibing.
Yeah, going into like the production section, is that what you're talking about?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
if I can mention a couple little honorable mentions,
please,
yes,
during my podcast, Mark.
During the tour, during the touring years,
we need that.
Okay, so we did the Jesus Freak tour, 96 into 97. Okay, huge arenas. The whole thing was an arena tour. It was just huge and just a lot of fun. And kind of before we did the European leg of that tour, we were in Europe for like 2.5 months, something like that. It seems like Toby comes up and he goes, "Hey, what do you guys in the in the backing band? What do you guys think about doing a record?" Because he was doing all these albums on Goatee, back then. And both me and the drummer Rick May, we had signed record deals. We had been in bands together, but we had signed multiple record deals over our career. So we were band guys. We knew how to write. We knew how to produce. We knew how to do all of that. The bass player Otto and the keyboard player Jason, they were more like tour players. That used to just they weren't band guys. They had never really been in bands before. It was always, I think Jason had got out of Belmont and, hopped into the tour player role, and he still does this day. Jason's awesome. He's been with Kelly Clarkson for years. He's been her music director. And,
cool.
and Otto's just an awesome bass player, but it was kind of like 4 of us get together. And it's like, yeah, we could do something, together. And immediately, the talk was, hey, get the machine. Let's get some Nashville writers, to write some of these songs and we can play them and stuff. And me and Rick, the drummer, were going like, hold on. Let's get 4 of us in a room and see what actually comes out. Let's play something. Let's just see what we've got. Okay. And so Rick had a studio with his drum kit up in Ohio. So we all went there, Chillicothe, Ohio. It's south of Columbus, And so we go there and set up in his place and start working on things. And we're starting to come up with some ideas. We're coming up with some interesting 90s power pop, quirky, fun, with a little bit of 60s in it, and just kind of almost a little bit All-Star United, if you guys remember hearing of that band back in the day. Yeah. Almost a little of that, but it was just, it kind of had its own thing, So we're sitting down, and what do we call it? I came up with the name Zilch. And basically because it was the name of a cut on a Monkees record back in the day.
Oh, that's nice.
And like the Monkees, there were 4 different guys that had nothing in common musically put together to try and create something.
Right.
And so we did a record. It's a quirky album. It's called Platinum. And it released, I think, in 97 or 98. It's on Apple Music, Spotify, if anybody wants to take a quick listen. And it's just quirky, weird, fun, power pop kind of thing. And then we did it for a little bit, and then Talk picked back up, and we kind of laid it down and morphed into Otto and Jason went on to do Sonic Flood with some other people. And I played some guitar on the Sonic Flood record, but I didn't really have interest in playing in a worship band. I mean, that just wasn't where I wanted to create originals, that sort of thing. But the reason I give that an honorable mention is because this will be the first time I'm announcing it here. I mentioned that Rick May, the drummer, passed away, I think, year before last. And we started work, me and him and Otto Price, the bass player. We started work on a second Zilch album.
No, what?
Awesome.
Oh,
so I have like 14 to 16 cuts of Zilch stuff that Rick May. It's the last stuff he ever played on before he left the planet.
Wow.
And I'm gonna get that finished this year. I'm waiting on Otto to finish the bass parts. I think you guys would like it a lot. It's quirky, fun,
dude.
Oh yeah,
it's got a little bit of punkisms to it. It's a real
Sweet.
hopeful record. You know, we're dedicating it to Rick May. We're going to call it "Say Hey Ricky," like "Hey Rick, say hey to God," you know, for
Oh,
us.
I love that, man.
And
That's the best.
and my
That's
buddy
so cool.
my buddy J.R. McNeely, who mixed loads of the
Oh,
arcade stuff,
yeah.
he's going to mix it
of
for us,
course.
which is great.
Oh yes, that's
So
the best.
you'll probably see that in the front of 25 is Zilch album.
Wow.
So
Sweet,
that
beautiful.
is incredible. And please, the second that starts to roll out,
Yes.
let us know, because
Absolutely will.
I
wanna
am
celebrate
so
that.
excited for that.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
cool.
that it'll be really neat, as said it, and Rick just killed it on it. I mean, he did such a great that was a bad choice of words, because although he wasn't killed, he passed away. But he did just an awesome job. And Otto is such a great bass player. He always does stuff, and it's just fun. We got all kinds of. It's a really uplifting record. You know, it's just fun power pop kind of thing with some pretty cranky guitars and fuzzy guitar solos through fuzz pedals and junk, and it's a lot of fun. So I'll definitely keep you guys posted.
That's sweet.
Yeah,
that's so cool to
please.
have too. As
I
like
can't wait.
one of the last things that he did too.
It is. It's
Yeah.
literally the last
Yeah.
stuff that he played drums on. You know, and
Yeah.
the funny thing is, he had only sent me stereo stems because he had cut drums up in Ohio, and I'm obviously down in Tennessee.
Right.
And his stems were really good, but it was just a stereo mix, and we were working the writing around it. And I go, man, I wonder if they got the multi tracks. And sure enough, before he had passed away, he's got one son. His name's Connor, who's older. And Connor had his laptop, and he goes, yeah, Dad told me where the files were at the Logic sessions. So he sent me the multi tracks. So I got the real deal, which is cool. So
great.
So on just a side note, I just wanted to throw that out.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
thank you.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So ask away on the production.
Okay.
But thanks for giving us the exclusive there. That's super exciting.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I was listening to a little bit of the first Zilch record today, actually. So it'd be cool to have it follow it up like all these years later, like a new one.
That's funny. That record, side note, the Platinum album. Well, we called it Platinum as a joke because
like a platinum record.
Yeah, we called it that. Our original idea was to try and make the album, like silver, like platinum. And of course, you can't do the reflective thing without it costing a ton of money. So we just settled for a silver color. But that was apparently the first album that Reed Shippen, who's just an awesome, legendary engineer here in town, that was the first album that he ever mixed.
Wow. Cool.
The first one was, but
that's so
which
cool.
I didn't know that he mixed. He did the initial mixes on Relient K on Anatomy and Two Laughs.
Two Laughs, yeah.
So which is fun.
Wow,
very cool.
All right, guys, ask away, fire away.
Oh man,
keep it coming.
Can I ask one live thing? As someone, I know we talked a lot about DC Talk, but I within the last year, I've recently gotten into Steve Taylor because of this show. So I would just love to. There's so much I'm sure we could talk about here, but I would just love to know either a favorite memory or like what was one of your favorite or a couple favorite songs of his to play live.
Oh, well, the Finish Line was awesome. That his stuff was so great. And if you're familiar with the Liver record, I'm on that. I'm the guitar player on that.
Are you left or right channel? Do you remember?
You know what? It's been a long time since I've listened to it.
Such a Josh question.
I was listening today, and I was like, I wonder which one's Mark.
I did most of the lead stuff, so it's probably on that side. And that album actually is 100% live, no overdubs at all.
Oh, that's
no
the best.
No auto tuning, no fixed notes. It was literally it was multi-tracked, but Russ Long mixed it, and it's literally that's why he called it Liver. Everybody thought it was Liver or what, Liver. And we had tour shirts. That was the awesome thing. Steve went out and got us. We had like gas station shirts that had our names on the pockets, and then it had a piece of liver with Steve Taylor Liver on it.
Oh, that's so good.
I still have those shirts somewhere around. That's amazing. I got them in a closet somewhere. But yes, working with Steve was great. Loved Banner Man was always a lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
easy listening was fun because I got to play the talk box, on that.
yeah.
That was always a blast to
Sweet.
be able to do that. But if you ever saw video, I don't know if there's a lot of video out there. Steve, and he encouraged me as well. He was just all over the stage. I mean, it was just way over the top with the show, and almost choreographed. It was almost like it was very different, for the time. And it was a physical gig, man. Trying to do all that stuff and play a guitar in tune and keep a whammy bar on a Strat in tune, and it was pretty nuts. But yeah, love Steve. He's just loved working with him. And the DC Talk thing happened right at the perfect time because I didn't know it, but at the time. But the last tour I did with Steve, he was going to get off the road, and that's when he put together his Squint record label, signed Sixpence. Signed Burlap the Cashmere and these different people to it. I was actually around when they were working on Kiss Me, which was interesting. We were working on the Zilch album at the time. I was actually staying with Russ Long, who was his engineer. And a funny conversation. I don't even know if Matt Slocum would remember this because we were just at that point. I haven't seen Matt in years, but back then we were pretty good acquaintances, And he brought in a Fender Jaguar guitar he had, and I kind of helped him tweak it a little bit because I can work on guitars a little bit. And he goes, man, we're working on this song that I wrote, and I don't know if I like it. And it was "Kiss Me." I think he felt it was a little pop for him.
Right.
And obviously it worked out in the
I could
long
see
run.
that.
Yeah. But before that, I mean, they had done albums on REX, that label back in the day, and Sixpence was Sixpence. It was just a different head. It was more alternative. And I remember going out and listening to it while they were, track. I think the bass player was tracking. Chris Donahue, I think, played on that, and listening to it and going, yeah, I mean, this is great. I mean, it has a whole Harry Nilsson, vibe, or it had that chord structure, and so it was great. Obviously, it ended up working out real well. But I got to know them. That was one of those Steve Taylor moment things,
Okay,
yeah,
Mark, I don't know if you realize this, but this is once again speaking from like an outside perspective. But within at this point 30 years of quote unquote Christian music.
Actually more than that. I hate to say it, but it's true.
30, 40 years. You're like
40 years, yeah.
You're like the Forrest Gump of
he's just around when all these
Christian
things are
music.
happening.
Like
there needs to be a movie.
Like I specifically think of like the montage in Forrest Gump where he's like shaking hands with like President Kennedy.
That's right.
And then President Nixon. And then like you're just like here in all of these moments. You're just like, oh yeah, no, I was involved in that. And it's just like this is why
funny.
We've been so excited to have you on the show because you are
I appreciate it. It's
I know that you wake up every day, you probably like have your coffee, you just live your life because you're you. And then you have people like us that see all of these little moments that you've just had.
The
and we're like,
interconnected web of Mark
this
Lee
is
Townsend.
insane. like we're like Charlie Day at the board with all the string. We're like, oh yeah, we can connect him to this and this and this, and it's just your life, and it's just crazy.
It's one of those things. The funny thing is, I think loads of people have those opportunities that have been in the business a while. I'm fortunate enough to remember them. I think that to a certain degree, there's some of that, but also I ended up at the right era. I ended up at the right place at the right time. And honestly, I mean, once again, not to over spiritualize, but I think it's a God thing. I mean, after my mom died, and I think I told you, like kind of when I rededicated I guess that's the word you'd use, my life to Jesus. At that point, I really kind of was like, I trust God, and I just let him open the doors, because honestly, as I said, DC Talk reached out to me. I didn't call them. Right. They saw me play with Steve Taylor. They knew they needed a guitar player. They called Steve and asked if it was okay to talk to me. That's how classy they are.
Yeah.
and it just worked out. And from that just led to other things, I may have said something on the last thing, and I should talk about it, the Relient K story. Have you guys do you already know the backstory of how they got connected with me and how ultimately they got in the business?
No, that's why you're here.
Yeah.
Come on,
tell us everything.
Okay. Well, here's the skinny. Okay. I'm with DC Talk at that point in time, and I'm living up in Canton, Ohio, because my wife's family's from there. My wife has a big Italian family. Okay. And so if I was going to be on the road 200 and some days a year, I wanted to have her big family, her dad, her brothers, everybody around to look after my kids. You know what I mean? So she wasn't dealing with that by herself. And grandparents living next door. You know what I mean? Just that whole family thing. And that's the Italian thing. And it's awesome. And I love it. So I'm in Canton. So we got this house, and it's an old house. And so I just set up a basic tiny control room and a booth in the basement. And I just kind of build it in. It's as crude as you get. I mean, it's drywall, throwing some foam on it, that whole thing. And I had a rack of ADATs. Do you guys know what an ADAT is?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were 8-track tape machines that used videotape and recorded digital, and you could use multiple machines together to sync. So you get 3 machines, you got 24 tracks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And had like a Mackie board and just some SM57s and a couple Audio-Technica 4033 mics, which are condensers, just great low-cost condensers, still are to this day. And so I was always messing with production. It goes back to my Todd Rundgren days. I had a 4-track reel-to-reel in my bedroom in high school with a little Tapco mixer and an SM57. It had a little spring reverb in it, and it just,
Nice.
I had little things, and I just do little recordings, and write songs and do things of that nature. So I'd always messed with the recording thing and made a lot of mistakes. People go to recording school. Now you can go to college and learn how to do signal. Well, now you can do everything off of YouTube. But for me, I learned working on records. I learned playing guitar. When I was playing guitar on records, I was watching engineers. I was watching what they did with these big old consoles, these Spectrasonic consoles, these SSLs, these API boards. I'd watch what they were doing. And see how they handled things, how they EQ'd things, how they ran their signal chain, what they were doing with compression and all that. It was a paid education, and I'm playing guitar on top of it and playing on a record that's released all over the world, right? So I took advantage of that stuff, but you make a lot of mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
And that's the best part to me about being an engineer is you make a mistake and you hopefully learn from it. And I've made loads and loads of them through the years. And this was all part of the process, having those ADATs, having that board, having a digital delay, having like a Roland rack reverb or a couple of Lisa's MIDI verbs, just old stuff, but you could make some recordings off of it, right? So my 2 oldest daughters were going to a youth group at the same time. And they came back, several months after going there, and they said, "Hey, Dad, these guys in our youth group have a punk band, and would you maybe do a demo for them or something?" Sure, of course. It's my daughters. What am I going to tell them? No,
right?
And so I didn't know anything about it. And I remember both Matts coming over to the house, and because they hung out with my daughters a lot, and they come over and just meeting them and just really nice. And, Thiessen especially was kind of quirky fun. He was a big personality, you could tell, and stuff. And so we said, yeah, sure. Okay. So we'll do it. And back then I was doing a lot of weekends, doing festivals with DC Talk. And then in the midweeks I'd be home, with time on my hands, and I was on salary. So it's like, I was getting paid either way. So I could just work on stuff at home. And so go, okay, yeah, so we'll bring them in. And I'd never heard anything of theirs before. They come in, they've got these just crappy amplifiers. I mean, it's like, I think Thiessen had some transistor Fender amp, and I think Hoops had what did Hoops have? I think he had like a little PV amp or something. It was just, it was just transistor. It was just junk. And, and Thiessen had, I think, a Boss DS1. he had this guitar called a Lion, Lyon, which I think was it was like a Strat, like a super Strat thing that was made by Washburn, but it was like the lowest of low end.
Right.
Hoops had this DOD grunge pedal or something like that. I think is what it was. I think that's what it was called. It was either the grunge or the meat box or something. It was one of those things. But it's terrible tones, just not good. And I think Hoops had like a fake, like a knockoff SG. It might have been a Samick or something, SG.
Sweet.
So they come in and I set them all up, and they didn't even have a drummer, like a full-time drummer at that point. They had this guy, Todd Frashoni, I think is his name, or something like that. And he was used to playing in metal bands. He wasn't a punk player at all. He was like a metal guy. And he comes in with this drum kit, and he had the thickest, like black hydraulic heads on the toms, and they sounded like cardboard. I mean, it was just a bad sounding kit, and it had the snare drum tuned way, way high. It was like tinky. It was just really bad, terrible sounding kit. And Pittman came in with like a lower line Fender bassman or a bass or something, and we ran him direct. And I had this gear, and so I knew immediately I wasn't going to try and have them sing and play at the same time, So I think I had Thiessen. I think they just played their stuff down for me. You know what I mean? Just like play through the song. There wasn't any production. There wasn't any arranging. It was just literally play the songs down. I think they did it in a couple hours. Man, I want to say we did 14 songs or something like that. Just bang, 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 bang.
They're punk songs.
Yeah. And we didn't overdub anything. I don't think at that point. It was just like play through just as it was, and then I think it was the same. That went into the evening. We started in the afternoon, went into the evening, and I think I had him come back the next day, and I had Thiessen and Hoops put vocals on it. And that's when he started singing, and he was singing kind of with a fake British accent.
Oh,
and which they were influenced at that time. You could tell they were into MXPX, but they were also into this band called Goaty Hook. Do you remember Goaty Hook?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I'd seen Goaty Hook. DC Talk did this huge thing called DCLA. That was like one was in LA, one was in DC, and it was like a arena thing and a bunch of bands. And Goaty Hook was there. They played one of the side rooms, and it was like comedy rock. I mean, they were just silly the whole time, and it was just real short songs, and it was just silly stuff, which I think that's where they got a lot of that humor from,
right?
In the early years, Marilyn Manson ain't my girlfriend, I mean, just silly, silly stuff, But they put the vocals on, and it was kind of like, okay, some of this stuff's kind of interesting lyric wise, I mean, I did a fast mix on it. Like, I mean, I mixed the thing through. You can't even call it a mix. It was just like balance and throw the faders up.
Right.
And because we weren't even recording on a computer back then, I don't think. And no, I'm pretty sure we weren't. And so like literally just threw it down, and that became this crazy little CD that they put out called All Work No Play. They were selling it through
I was
going
to ask, so it did become All Work and No Play.
It did.
That is all work. Oh, wow.
And it was just 2 days of work. And
it was literally 2 days of work. And I wasn't even taking it seriously. I didn't dismiss them. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I put effort into it, but I didn't do any production per se.
Right.
I didn't really. I might have kind of helped them figure out some vocal things and how to arrange a couple little things here and there. But it was a demo.
Just a fun project.
So go out on the road. I'm back out. We get that done. I take it to a buddy in Chillicothe, and he masters it so they can do a CD and put it on a CD. And so I've got CDs of this stuff with me, and I go out with Toby, or we're out on the road doing a date. We're in the back of the bus, and Toby goes, "Townsend, man, I know you produce and record all the time. You got anything I can hear?"
Oh my god.
No way.
Yes. So I had worked on 2 other projects. I worked with this one band out of Indiana, out of Anderson University, and they were really, really good. It kind of had a little bit of a Dave Matthews vibe, but not. It was funky and an acoustic bass and stuff. But the guy named Cliff Ritchie was a singer, and just a really great voice, just big, thick, really good singer. It was a good project. We put time into it and stuff. And I had that with me, and I had another couple little things, and they were all miles better than this all work, no play. I mean, they were like kind of more finished products that sounded good, And so I play all this stuff, and Toby thought all it was good, and then I play for him. I go, well, I got this thing called Relient K, and it just, it was a demo we just kind of threw together, and he listens to it, and he goes, okay. He goes, I like this. He loved Marilyn Manson Ate My Girlfriend, or My Girlfriend. He loved that I get what because it was shtick, And what I didn't realize is that Toby was going to he was wanting to create a sub label. Okay, instead of Goatee, he was wanting to create a sub label.
Right.
So anyhow, I played this for him, and there were some Tooth and Nail at that point was not Tooth and Nail. It was just a cute label that, it wasn't the empire that Tooth and Nail became, right?
Right.
Right.
And then this guy, Frank Tate, had a label called 5 Minute Walk Records. As a matter of fact, the W's, I think, were on 5 Minute Walk.
They were,
Yep.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there were a couple of, what was it, Sidewalk?
5 Iron was on there.
5 Iron, and what was it? There was a band. They had really clever, because Saki did this guy named Saki did the records.
Yeah.
Saki,
and they
Echoing Green or something, maybe. I know they were also on, I think.
Was it Sidewalk Kids, or they had the best thing? It was like a CD that had black and white, like a coloring book, and then they put a couple crayons in it.
Oh,
in the CD case.
That's so good.
It was such a great idea. But those were all budget labels, and Toby wanted to get a little bit of that. And those labels did not have the same distribution that Christian music had, where it had the big distribution channels and the big money behind it. So Toby wanted to sign a couple little bands for that. And goes, oh man, Relient K be perfect for that, and he was ready to do that whole thing.
Was it sort of connected to a genre in his mind, or was he trying to keep it very broad?
It was just trying to do what 5 Minute Walk had done. It was just a lower price label that he could use through a sub channel. Yeah, a small imprint,
Cool.
And having been in the record business for a while and had, having signed deals on Murr Records and the Word System and things, I just knew that it would be hard for the guys to make a career off a sub label, because obviously like 5 Iron W's, they don't have a career, and they were great bands, but they never had the big career, okay, where they were making crazy money, and making a living, making a retirement type of living, So I told the guys, I said, hey, we can do that. We'll just go back, recut these songs, do a better job of it, try to put some production to it, be disciplined. We'll use my guitar stuff. We'll use my amps, my guitars that play in tune.
Yep.
And we'll just really try and make the best we can, And that's when they also had a different drummer. They got Stephen Cushman at that point in time, and he was better suited to, to that type of music.
They were doing.
And once again, we were not recording on a computer, it was still doing ADATs. So fast forward, I told him, I said, well, you could do that, or we could work really, really hard and force Toby's hand to where he has to put it on Goatee. That was my goal. And the guys were like, yeah, sure. Okay, whatever. They just were happy to play music, I think, And it's funny because we worked on it a lot in the mornings into the afternoon, because Thiessen was a night manager at a Wendy's in Bolivar, Ohio. So we had to knock off at 4:00 so he could go
Incredible.
And work at the night manager.
Awesome.
Which is funny. The side note on that is, whenever we'd go out to eat someplace, especially at Wendy's in later years, he was highly critical of he'd be sitting there going, they didn't do the chili right, or they didn't do the fries right,
He knows how the Frosties get made.
That's right. He literally does. So we worked really hard at it all over the summer. And I said, I was playing festivals on the in-betweens, and then during the week we'd work on it. And Toby kept going, you got anything for me to listen to? Well, I was purposely kind of keeping it away from him, because I didn't want him to have a preconceived knowledge of what was coming. Okay. And so we worked on all the songs and did the best we could with what we had. And I brought it down to Nashville, and I got my buddy Russ Long, who mixed the Steve Taylor, the Liver record and stuff. I'd known him a long time, and he was in our budget because that was the budget we had to work with. And he mixed it. And the first song he mixed was 17 Magazine off of the first album. So he got a mix pretty much done. And I called Toby, said, why don't you come over and take a listen? You could finally hear what's going on. I think he was pretty excited. And he comes and he takes a listen, and he really loved it. And then he takes me outside and he goes, forget SML XL. This is Goatee. And I'm like,
yes.
Yeah, mission accomplished.
Let's go.
Because now you guys will actually get a real record deal. You'll actually get a real record deal with a bigger budget, with a little bigger budget. And we can kind of work on this thing and develop you guys over time. And that's what worked out. And it's ironic that it goes from this sub-label to Relient K is the most successful thing Goatee's ever had as far as combined sales, so it's
wild.
So that's kind of how that story started. They were friends with my daughters.
So that's what I was about to say. The big takeaway is listen to your daughters that are in youth group. Because they have the pulse, man. They know what's
up. They're the tastemakers. Yep.
And every record we tried to do this just a little bit. We just kept trying to climb the ladder. On Anatomy, that was the album we discovered the Mesa dual rectifier amp. And Dave Douglas came in at that point. And that's when we did it. And that was the first album that we did on Logic on a computer. I just had an old Mac G3 and we did it on that but even then it isn't like recording on now. I mean, just computer power wasn't anywhere near it was, and editing in Logic was clunky back then, and auto-tune was in its absolute infancy, so you couldn't just put it on auto setting.
It wasn't like
clunky
practical edition. Right.
Yeah, it's just we worked our butts off. We literally worked our tails off to make sure we got it right, and I really worked on recording it right. And that's when I found out, especially with Thiessen, because he doesn't play with a pick, he plays with his thumb. He has a callus on his thumb, and he that's why he does a lot of downstrokes. Well, that tone is difficult to record because it doesn't have the same attack that a pick has, and so you have to really mess with the gain and the top end, and have an understanding how to work that. And it worked out for a long time until later records he just decided he didn't want to play anymore. so we at that point we were putting all the guitar stuff on hoops, and he was perfectly happy to do that. But every album. Anatomy was a big jump up. That and then Two Lefts was an even bigger jump because we started using more Stratocaster, Fender Stratocaster on things. We used a lot of my amps. We tried different types of ambient miking. We tried different signal paths. That was even more experimental. We introduced more keyboards at that point into that album. And then, of course, you go to that was when we had all moved down to Nashville. I came down to work on the label that the wedding was on at Deas Vale, and that was our first time in Nashville studios, as a band, and that took us to another level, of bringing other things in. So, and that was, each record had its own moments. I think you said you just did something on the record on the 20th.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
That was probably the hardest Relient K record to make. That was that was the hardest one because it was Brian Pittman had just left the band. There was a lot of infighting, and Brian had just left the band, I think midway through the record. And Matt was dating Katy Perry at the time before she was Katy Perry.
Right.
And they were both they were both emotional, so it didn't work. And she's in Los Angeles and he's in Nashville, and we'd work till like midnight, and then he'd be fighting on the phone with her half the night, and then getting up the next day and trying to make music and just get our heads in the right place. And it was difficult, It was just an emotionally difficult record to work on. And yet we got a really good product out of it. We simplified some things. The guitars on that record ironically, we went from two lefts and even some of the early Christmas stuff of using a lot of different guitars and a lot of things. And we kind of settled on like a Mesa, a Marshall, my Silvertone amp. Those were really the three main amps. And then the guitars, we kind of lowered that down too. Almost the bulk of the entire record is my 82 Gibson Les Paul Custom and my 78 Gibson Les Paul Deluxe, and kind of one on one side, one on the other, you know. And then we maybe do a little bit of Hoops had a Telecaster back then, which horrifically, I don't know, might have talked to you about it before, but it got stolen out of Thiessen's house.
Oh no.
Thiessen had a party and he had a bunch of people over and stuff, and somebody walked off with Hoops years ago, first good guitar he ever had. It's a black American Fender Telecaster.
That's a tragedy, man.
Yeah, and I just can't believe you go to somebody's house and just walk out with a guitar.
No, that's messed up.
And they took Thiessen's laptop. I think they took Thiessen's laptop too.
Oh no.
Well, okay.
Wow. Unbelievable.
You heard it here first, folks. Don't have parties.
Yeah, and
don't have parties.
And if you have the guitar and you hear this and you have the guitar,
yes,
send it back to me anonymously and I'll
bring
get
it back.
To Hoops, you know?
Yes, yeah.
But it's yeah.
So I have a very specific question.
Sure.
After all of this.
Okay, sure.
Okay,
He's good for it.
I see the reactions in my co-host's face. So, Mark, I'm very curious if you feel like you brought up in your origin story how like you wanted to be in the Beatles, the Monkees, like this was the vibe.
The bands. Yep.
You wanted to be a part of. I don't know how much you feel a part of it, but from my perspective at least, you are kind of that for Relient K.
Oh yeah, we've been family for years. I mean, there was a time, you know, my oldest daughter was married to Hoops at one point in time. And unfortunately it didn't work out, and that's sad. It happens, you know. But I'm absolutely, we are still family, you know, and
yeah.
I know it's gotta be a little bit weird, just like being older, but do you feel that to some extent, like with Relient K? Because we feel that like you're basically like the fifth
George
Beatle
Martin to their Beatles.
Yes, I was gonna say George
Martin.
Martin.
A running joke, you know, and all credit goes to them in the sense of, I mean, that's the kind of quality people they are. I mean, they whether
I see you
as
an intrinsic part.
Yeah, and whether I had an influence on them in that area or not, you know, or whether it was just part of them, they're incredibly loyal. They've been incredibly loyal, and on my end, I've been incredibly loyal back to them in the sense of I've always made way for them. You know what I mean? And we've always brought the best tools out and the best, you know, always given the max effort. And even with it's funny, even when they did the one record, when they did 5 Score, because they had signed to Capitol, and of course 5 Score, Capitol wanted to put them with Howard Benson, who was having a lot of hits back then, and they felt weird about it. And I'm like, no, dude. I mean, this is a great opportunity the way you look at it. But even with, I ended up doing Deathbed with them off that record.
Yeah.
And even having input, you know, me and Matt would listen to the mixes coming back from Chris Lord Alge when we were working on Deathbed. And, you know, me and Matt look at you and he'd kind of go, well, what do you think? Well, you know what? Yeah. What do you think? You know, it's just kind of that whole thing. So even on that record, though I didn't do the bulk of it, I mean, I was, as far as I'm concerned, I was honored to work on the most epic cut.
Crucial part of that album.
And that was 2 weeks of me. I'm the bass player on that cut. You know, I mean, it's like literally, you know, me and Thiessen and at Hoops, and we just kind of assembled it over a couple of weeks. You know, just working casually during the day, and at my home studio. That whole thing was cut there. So I think they started the very, very front of it, like the drum track, the very front drums might have been cut at LA because they tried. I think he played it for Howard Benson, and Howard Benson didn't want to work on an 11, 12-minute cut.
Sure.
And I get that because he gets paid to do the pop stuff, and I get that. I totally understand that. Me, I'm
and you got to go do some Todd Rundgren stuff, right?
Totally.
You got to play.
We did everything. We threw everything in the kitchen sink on that song. So
I love it.
But yeah, but definitely. I mean, it's been a special relationship. It's been a George Martin type relationship. And even now, it's like, I did the last record they did, Air for Free. And that was a great experience. We had a good experience. It was an experimental record. I call it their white album, because it's just different than the others. But it's got some really great moments in it, and just really clever stuff. And love the lyrics. I mean, I said Thiessen rhyming, dag nabbit and jackrabbit. It's
right.
like,
Uh-huh.
It's still my favorite rhyme to this day, I think, on a record. So yeah, it's been a great relationship overall. And I live probably about 35 minutes south of where those guys are at. They're both in the heart of downtown Nashville kind of thing. And Hoops and Thiessen are. And I live south of there. I live where Davey Basinger lives, and all these different people live down here, loads and loads of people. So I had to get out of the city. It was just too fast, too overcrowded. I just have no appeal to go see bands at clubs, and I'm way over that. So
for sure.
Yeah.
But yes, it's absolutely been a family relationship, and obviously my grandkids are part of that, and that whole thing. So it's good. I mean, there's no acrimony anywhere on either end, and
you felt like you kind of got that band experience over the course of y'all's work
I went out on tour with them.
Yeah,
2016. I said I was supposed to go out 2 weeks, and I ended up a month and a half out with them. And it was great, and we had a great time. So and it's unfortunately we all had to grow up, because especially in the early years when they didn't know any better. I knew a little bit better, but I was willing to suspend being an adult. Here's a classic case of how great it was. Anatomy was already out and done. And they were really starting to draw crowds. I mean, they were really becoming a thing. Anatomy was really the record that kind of broke things to that next level for them, So they were at that point, they had a friend of theirs that was managing, and he did a good job for them, with his resources as good as he could do, at that point in time. But like they're out and doing the merch table, and at that point, Thiessen was on. I mean, he would just talk to people all day, and he was just into it, and he talked to people at the record table. The other guys a little bit less so. They didn't necessarily. They just weren't big people persons, And
right.
But come to find out, they're in their. They've been doing a bunch of shows, and they had a backpack, from the merch, as far as like where they kept cash and stuff. They counted it. They were carrying around $60,000 in cash in a backpack in their van. $60,000, and they had no idea. And at that point, it was kind of like, okay, well, I guess it's time to become grown-ups. And they ended up hooking up with my buddy Steve Thomas as a manager at that point. And Steve was managing Jennifer Knapp. He was managing the Supertones.
Cool.
He was managing Bleach at that point. So he had a roster already that was working, and he was connected to CAA booking and everything else. So he kind of helped them get to that next level, at that point in time. But those early years, I think there was just a great, silly, fun naivety to it,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
doing our little EPs on the in-betweens. Like they had what was it?
Employee.
They had the one EP that had
what is it?
Oh, I think it was Employee. It might have been Employee. No, it was one of the first EPs because it had the cut that didn't make Anatomy called Operation.
Oh yeah, was it the Creepy EP?
Creepy EP?
Yeah, might have been the original Creepy EP, and then but they did the quote unquote backyard version of pressing on. Okay, well, what we did is I just literally had Thiessen play an acoustic and sing it, and just as it was, and my wife was mowing the lawn outside, and I thought I heard something leaking into the mic, and I'm going, rather than stop her, I just grabbed another condenser real quick, ran up the stairs, stuck it out on the back porch, and just started recording her mowing the lawn. And at one point, she hit something in the lawn. She hit like a tree stump or something. A year ago, flack, and the mower just stops dead. So I scooted that to pressing on, flack.
Wow, Mark, that's so great.
So
that's so great.
but on that, I think that had the original version of Jefferson Aeroplane on it. I remember I had this old. You guys ever see, like, it was Charles chips where they come in a big can, like a big metal can with a plastic bag in it, like you'd see maybe popcorn or something. Well, we had like a I can't remember what it was, but it was from like the 50s or something, like an old metal can with a lid that was down in my basement, that had been in the family. Well, I stuck that in front of the drum kit and stuck a mic down inside of it and put the lid kind of cranked on. And that is part of that drum sound. We were doing stuff like that back then, just anything to mess it up and do something cool.
I love it.
And unfortunately, the farther we got along, although I can't say that. I was going to say we got away from that, but we never really did.
Right. Well, I remember there's a moment on the making of the Forgetting Not Slow Down where there's like Hoops is playing one note on the guitar and like you're bending the string up on the tuning peg and like, Thiessen's like cranking the gain up on the pedal just for like one note. Like that stuff still carried on. It probably looked differently, but yeah.
It did. And now that
it's almost like you synthesized it. Like you filtered it down to these moments.
We might have had better gear to work with, and better, obviously, in some really good studios in Nashville, expensive consoles and good mics. But as much as I think about it, we never quit that stuff. Forget Not Slow Down. We had all kinds of things like that we would do. Playing baseball bats in Savannah for percussion. I think me and Ethan Luck did a whole percussion day because I think the Mats were sick or something, and we just came in and did a bunch of that stuff on Savannah.
Awesome.
So, and even on Air for Free, we did all kinds of quirky things, with tape echoes and like actual tape echoes. I got a rolling tape echo back there that my sign is under. That somebody gave that to me years ago. A dear friend in Ohio. His name's Brad Ross. Biggest egghead I've ever known. He worked for like Rockwell. He was just smart, just crazy, rocket science level smart, and noodling with. He bought nice guitars and loved to noodle around. That was kind of his outlet. And I was over at his house back in the day, and he had this, and he pulled it down, and it was pristine. It's like from the 80s. It's like Andy Summers of the Police would use this. And he goes, "Yeah, I don't really use this anymore. You want it?" Yeah, heck yeah, I do. Dude, that thing, it's got the Boss chorus circuit in it, the original one that's just thick and great. It's got a great tape echo, and it's also got a short tank spring reverb that sounds really unique. Wow. And I've used that on tons of. I've run drum kits through it. I've run mono mics on a drum room through it, and been turning knobs. Supertones record, we did loads of that. I ran everything through that. I mean, and it's because it's just unique organic sounds. I did an EP earlier in the year for this band called Danger House that's down here in Columbia, Tennessee, and really cool band. And even on that, we used that tape echo a ton for the guitar sounds. It was just stuff like that. So we never really turned our back on that ever. And to be honest with you, I think when they worked in LA with Howard Benson, there definitely wasn't any of that going on because that was a process record. I mean, it's like, we got the drum room, we got the guitar room, we got the bass room. You go to different parts of the zones, right? And so I think that when we came back and worked on Deathbed, that was absolutely the dead opposite of what they had done in LA. And it just kind of felt like we're doing our thing again.
Yes.
Right.
And I was so happy we put that on the record.
And that probably speaks to why that song is like so big within the Relient K fandom. Right?
Oh, and the writing. I mean, Thiessen bloomed as a writer. I mean, you know, to go from where he was at in the first album, where he had some clever puns, and even on the second album, I remember you were talking about Gin Knapp. I was out with Gin Knapp when we were mixing Anatomy. We mixed it at a place called the Castle in Nashville, actually Leapers Fork area, and Reed Shippen mixed it, and I was down there with him working on that, and so I had a CD, you know, of refs that we'd worked on before the album came out, and I was out on the road with Jen, and you know, she grew up a farm girl, or you know, grew up that her mom was a vet, so she was around horses and everything else. And I played for her, "May the Horse Be With You."
May the horse be with you.
and she was absolutely horrified. She rolled her eyes because
she was horsified.
Was she horsified? It was every bad pun you could ever come up with. I thought it was funny, and she got it, but she just was like, "Oh my gosh, could this guy have, you know, just stop with the puns, just stop, you know." But even with that, you know, and then just continuing to take obviously was kind of the first of the serious records, you know, where Thiessen got really, really introspective on things. You know, that's where Who I Am Hates Who I've Been, and, you know, Be My Escape, of course, and, you know, just all those things.
And even, at least from the outside in, I feel like I even saw that trial by fire, or like growing process, maturation process, like the transformation happening on Two Lefts. Like it was like he figured out his punny like skill set, and then he was learning how to apply it to write serious songs.
Yeah,
you know, and then by it was like, oh, I figured this out, and he was kind of firing on all cylinders at that point.
Yeah, and that's why
it's really fun.
And that's why for me, Five Score, I mean, I appreciated it, but I kind of felt like the production on it, just being honest, I felt like it was a step back because it was so pop.
Yep.
It was so pop and glissy. And then just some of the songs, what was this single? I don't know. Matt
really done something right.
Yeah. Is that we should get jerseys because
because we make a good team.
I felt that was kind of cheesy, and I think Matt did too, but I think Howard saw it for what it was overall. But after coming off the quality of them, there were a couple songs on that I felt were a little bit trying to push them into like appealing to 12-year-old girls.
Yeah, yep. I mean, I think we like briefly touched on this in our episode. Like, okay, this is a band that is like growing up at a point where we're all growing up.
Yes.
And then I can fully understand a like label, specifically like a major label decision to double down on that.
And I felt like they did. And to me, Deathbed was the thing that brought it back to
right.
To like that was the red meat for the fan. And once again, I'm not dogging the record because there's so many good songs on it, and I enjoyed playing several of them when I was on tour with them. And we had done demos for several of those songs before they went out to LA to do that. But like, and when I saw the video, it might have been the Must Have Done something where he's kicking the soccer ball around or something. I'm going, dude, this is like Disney Channel stuff, man. It's
for sure.
I just wasn't down with it at all, and I know I don't think Thiessen was down with the video either. You know, I mean, I think it's one of those things where you don't know what it looks like till it comes out. You know, overall, now it's that but Thiessen's hard on himself about anything. You know, I mean, he's super overly critical about his own work, and there's been times I've had to like, no, Matt, this is really good. You are on the right track, because he'll beat himself up over stuff pretty bad.
Oh yeah, so many of those incredible artists, right? Like really struggle with the critic component, like just taking them by storm sometimes.
Absolutely, but yeah, it's been a blessing to have worked with those guys, and I'd love to do it again someday if they ever decide to make a record again someday. I don't know that there is any real. I don't know what kind of inspiration, with Matt. I mean, the thing I think, especially with Thiessen, is that he worked his butt off, man, especially clear up through 5-score. He worked his tail off. I remember in the early years, he answered every email. He had this old Vizio or laptop, or Vio, Sony, the Sony one or whatever, that he had bought with a little bit of money that he got from like Two Lefts or something. And he'd answer every fan email. He'd talk to fans all the time. And he just burned himself so hard after like the first 13 years of their career. He just beat himself to death. And I think that he's in a position now where he still makes music, but I think he's enjoying life being semi-retired. I mean, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
He'll go out and play a show,
totally.
But he's enjoying the fruits of, it's like an NFL guy.
Right.
Most of those guys are going to have a short window where they can play and make money, and then they got to make it last the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And so they do their time and that whole thing. So who knows if they decide to get another record together? I would imagine at some point it'll happen. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I love those guys so much, and we are family. Still even through all this stuff. It's just life. We grow older and we move on and do things.
That's true. Okay,
Absolutely.
I do have one question.
Shoot.
Friend of our show and friend of mine in real life, AJ Simmons. He is a political scientist and co-host of another show that I'm on. I asked him if he had any questions for you, specifically Mark. And he brought one in particular that I am also very curious about.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you get Deus Vale back together? Pretty please.
Oh man, I'd love
to.
Like, pretty please. Yeah. Can we get more Deus Vale?
What's funny? How they came my way was through the wedding.
Yeah. Well, really? Okay, that's the whole thing. So I'm in Arkansas. The wedding was so like they used to be Say Anything. They were
easier said.
Easier said. Thank you.
Yeah.
Not Say Anything. They used to be like a local band, and Deus Vale was also a relatively local band. Like my high school band,
good. Yes,
opened for them a ton. I love Deus Vale, and
Wes is an extraordinary talent.
Yeah, yes. I want to talk about them with you a little bit.
Okay, the quick story on it is I kept hearing from the wedding. They go, you gotta check out this Deus Vale band. They're so good. And I what's with the name? I mean, nobody can remember or pronounce it. It's just kind of weird. And so they sent me their demo that they had done, and I go, dude, sounds like a girl. It's like I thought it was a girl. Okay, but it was. Yeah. It was how it was recorded. It was how it was recorded because they just whoever had recorded it, they didn't do a bad job. But part of being an experienced producer engineer is knowing how to capture somebody's voice, for real. Some people you just toss a mic. I mean, good gosh, some people just have a voice that you could put anything in front of them and it's just going to sound great.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Chris Cornell is what, guys like that. You know what I'm saying? You could put a bad Radio Shack mic in front of him and he's still going to sound great. I mean, relatively speaking. Well, with Wes, as I said, it sounded like it didn't sound like Wes. And so I couldn't quite figure it out. And I thought it was kind of sort of interesting, but some of the guitar stuff didn't, was okay. It wasn't great. So they said, well, could you at least come out and see him? Sure. So I took a road trip and they were playing some club, and it was in Arkansas somewhere.
Was it Okay, I'm trying to figure it out. Was it Vino's in Little Rock or
You
the
know what
music
the weird thing
hall?
is? It wasn't music hall.
Okay,
It
it wasn't music
but
hall.
yeah, it was kind of a smallish club.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, somewhere around, I brought I just brought a little 2 channel, like an old Pro Tools inbox, and I think I literally just put 2 channels in off the
Yeah.
board, just to
Nice.
just to have a reference, for something to listen to. But when I saw him, it made sense to me, and I go, "Oh, this guy does sound like a guy. He just has a real high voice."
Mhm.
And at that point, it's kind of like, okay, this is cool. And I expressed to the owners of the label that I wanted to sign them, and so we did, and started working on the first record. Not terribly long after that. Well, I did some demos with them first, and immediately I knew that I could capture Wes's voice correctly. You know what I
Right.
mean? So where you didn't walk away thinking it was a girl. It's like,
Yeah.
no, it's a guy that's got just a great falsetto.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they had not written at that point. They had probably half an album, 2/3 of an album already
Mhm.
written. And they brought in a couple other songs, like Surface was one that came in later, and Shoreline wasn't written at that point.
Oh, wow.
And so that when we were doing demos, that was a brand new song. And immediately I was like, whoa, okay, that's just a whole other level of great. Anyway, look
Yeah.
at it. And they were awesome. They were really great to work with. A quirky band.
Yeah.
The drummer was a good, solid player, but he was quirky. He was like beats. He wasn't like a typical drummer with a typical flow. He did a lot of hi hat, like creating almost like beats. You
Right.
know,
Mm-hmm.
almost like loops. And
Samples, yeah.
yeah, it was almost kind of like that thing. But that's just how Kelsey played. You know, and the guitar player was Ruben on the first record. Andy Moore came in. Andy was definitely on the second record for sure, and he might have played a little bit on the first. I can't remember if Ruben had left. Nah, I think it was all Ruben. But yeah, we worked on this record, and it just turned out absolutely amazing. And I knew it was something special. And Wes's Wes and Laura Beth were married at that point, and it all worked. I mean, everything worked. I mean, everybody seemed to get along. They had this funny thing going there. It's almost like there wasn't like a real band leader. It's like kind of like, well, what do you think? I don't know. What do
Right.
you think? Well, what do you think? Paralysis of
Super diplomatic.
analysis.
Right.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Did you
And
see
everybody,
it get in the way sometimes? When like they would be too sort of kind and
yeah,
open-minded?
yeah, and that's where I think I helped with some decisions on things,
Mhm.
and of course we did, but it was just a good working relationship, all the way around. And Wes is clearly a great talent. He had um he carried a lot of emotional baggage in that
Mhm.
sense, which was hard to sort out. I think it's partly why they never continued in the long run.
Right.
What,
Well, and
what was
potentially why their music is so insanely cathartic too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I love what they did. I totally wish that. Yeah, I haven't. I'm trying to think. I've talked to Andy Moore. I mixed his solo project that he did a few years ago. The guitar player, Justin, the bass player, I've been in touch with. Trying to think. Kelsey, I'm still in touch with. I haven't been in touch with Wes and Laura Beth in years. That's not purposeful. We're just in different circles. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Overall. And I think they're in Nashville and just have, they do their thing and they work jobs and whatever have you. Uh, but it'd be interesting to see if they'd ever decide to do that. I have no idea. I don't think Wes
Yeah.
and Laura Beth aren't married anymore, so I don't know I don't know how that plays into it either, because a lot of times people could split and be cool, and they may very well be that way. I don't know. So,
Right.
but yeah, just great albums. They were willing to go there, and they were willing. They had great ideas.
Yeah.
We just put together, and I tried to work with them on guitar tones a little bit and get that aspect of it. And they were just great.
Well, and what's fun is like seeing as we've kind of weaved through this conversation, going from the beginning where you were citing all of these genres and bands and sounds that you were attracted to that were all over the map stylistically, right? And even production wise and all that. And then as we've kind of weaved through this conversation and gotten to this side of it, like we're at a place where we have been able to see how you took that wide open, broad interest, and you then found your own way to synthesize that and create, like foster that in your sort of musical stable, if you will, and work
just trying to be
alongside musicians
encouraging
of all kinds and different sounds and different writing approaches. And
yeah
I think that's phenomenal, because there are those producers that, you know, for better or for worse, and whether they like it or not, because I think some probably lean heavily into this, they're very single-minded, right? They've
it's the Mutt
a
Lang
style.
model.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the
Exactly.
Mutt Lang model, you know. It's like it's my way or the highway, and that's
Yep.
it. And I've always
And that's
tried
the
to
thing.
be pretty
Some bands might
open-minded
benefit
about
from that.
stuff, you know. Yeah, some do.
But I like your approach, really, Mark. Like, I feel like as a musician, if I were walking into a studio setting, whether it's like a home studio or like more intimidating, like huge commercial space, I'm going to want a producer that I really feel like initially, like from the get-go, is in my corner. Like we mentioned, like kind of has that diverse background and interest and openness, and also is able to really connect on a heart level and bring some emotional intelligence to the fold. I think it's
It's
cool
being
that
a
we've just
psychologist.
happened to get there. Yeah, essentially.
As a producer, a huge part of it is being a psychologist or a psychiatrist. You know, it is. And like a good example is Relient K. I mean, you're just talking a bunch of youth group kids from Canton, Ohio, you know? And if we would have signed and then gone to like a Nashville studio, I think it would have been terrifying for them. I think we would not have gotten great product out of them. But because we did them in my home studio where everything was safe, and I had good gear, I had some pretty decent gear back then too, but it was a safe place to create. And I you know, they knew I was a player and a musician, and they knew what Mark Lee Townsend was, whatever, you know,
Right.
whatever that means.
The brand.
But the brand, but
yeah,
MLT Incorporated.
But at the end of the day, I was just a guy having fun playing guitar the way they were. I was the same way. I just always enjoyed having fun and noodling around with music, and just around. And my job as a producer was just to try and, you know, be an ear, let them create, be an ear, help glue it together. That's why I've always enjoyed engineering the records that I produce, because, you know, at the least I can help shape some of the tones. And if they come in with a wacky part, okay, well, let's make it more wacky, you know. Let's not just create something that's weird and then it sticks out like a sore thumb being weird. I know if you're going to go there,
Right.
Let's frame it right, make something really interesting, you know.
Yeah,
let's run it through a Leslie, let's do different things like that. So it we've never, there's never really been a no, you know what I mean. Overall, it's like, no, let's try it, and then if we look at it and all go, it doesn't quite work, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's been tons of times where I've had to say it's good, you know.
Yeah, it's way more beneficial to like try it and figure out if it's wrong than to
totally
just assume that it's just not going to work.
And you can do that if you're not on the clock. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
True.
You know, if you're not paying, $4,000, or $1,000 a day or $1,500 a day, you know what I mean? If you're not paying crazy in studio time, which we weren't, I said we had a budget, and basically I budgeted for the mix, and then I just paid myself the rest of it on a lot of those early budgets, because I was providing all the gear, and it was unlimited hours, you know. And I said we weren't in the early albums. We never had a really good budget until up to that, everything was still budget, but it was selling like crazy, you know. So we put the money into the creativity and the time instead of into the nerding out on the gear in the studios, you know.
Right. For sure.
Totally. Which makes sense.
Okay, guys, we have been doing this for
I have no idea.
a
About 2
significant
hours.
It's been
amount of time.
That's the thing. It's been about 2 hours, but I'm like, this could be a 10-hour conversation. Like,
No,
Mark just needs to like start a podcast.
That's the thing. It's like, okay,
every couple
Mark,
months come back.
Like I'm fighting so hard against just like trying to get all of the tips from you, and I'm trying really hard to not just like send you TJ's music, to be like, everything both of y'all are saying, I'm like, okay, y'all should make music together. So I'm
I'm always open for the next thing, man.
yeah. So
right.
I think from a podcast perspective,
Yes, of course.
I think we have to start wrapping it up.
So get your clincher, like if stuff you're dying to know. If you got a couple of things you're dying to know, wanting to ask,
yes,
go for
it. Okay. Who would win in a fight between Relient K and DC Talk?
Ooh.
Wow.
Well, it's
Let's
funny
say
because
era.
Like
specifically.
Well, the funny thing is, there's no way Teason's not interested in fighting anybody.
Right.
Neither is Hoops.
Sonic fight then.
So
No. An actual fight because if Thiessen and Hoops are out, I'm guessing Kevin Max is probably out. He probably not interested.
No, Kevin Max would mix it up with somebody.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Hell yeah.
But Dave, I mean, can anybody take Dave? Let's be real.
No,
I feel like Dave could take them all on.
I think it all comes down to Dave.
Is Brian Pittman still in the band? Because I think that's a big...
Yeah,
that's true.
No. Pittman's the biggest teddy bear on the planet.
Okay.
That's tough. I love that.
And in some ways, I was really worried about Relient K when he left because Pittman was a lot of heart and soul of the band. He was glue. He was the guy that came up with ideas like penny loafers, how stupid they are. I mean,
cool.
Brian had this great sense of humor, and he was the hang buddy. He was fun. He'd come up with he gave Thiessen a lot of ideas, in that sense. And he had his isms, his Brian-isms of the words he'd use. I was really, really worried about how the band would react after he left, and they carried on and they picked up the right people and kept going. But no, Pittman was a teddy bear. Dave, I think, could mix it up because he can get wound up about stuff. But I think
drummer.
But I think he would rather just roll his eyes and walk away.
Right.
He's probably capable of getting wound up and wanting to beat the crap out of somebody, but in the long run, he'd be the guy's like, yeah. Later, I'm done. I think Ethan could mix it up when Ethan was doing that. Ethan could mix it up.
I can see it.
But out of DC Talk, Tate would have no interest in mixing it up. Toby, I think, would have to just be pushed to the point of blowing a gasket.
Right. For sure.
But K-Max, I could see K-Max getting in and mixing it up.
Okay. So it's basically Kevin versus Dave in this.
Kevin Max in one
Dave.
corner versus Ethan
Dave
Luck
Douglas.
or in the other corner.
Like that.
And everyone else is like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, totally.
Whatever.
Yeah. It's funny because
nice hypothetical.
Some bands are just. I've never been in one, but some bands, man, they could fight, man. They could just they could just kick it and do it, So,
they brawl and then they get on stage and just like shut down a set, like an awesome set.
Yeah, no kidding. That's happened before in music now, hasn't it? Yeah.
No, for sure. Okay, so that was my question. So now I'm going to open
another
it up.
one that you wanted to clear up from Mr. Kevin Max Kylan that you wanted to.
Okay. So, Kevin Max on his Stereotype B, that was his first solo record.
That's correct.
There is another Mark Townsend.
That's correct. His name is Mark Grady. Grady is his middle name. Mine is Lee.
Okay. Because
there we go.
We
yes. The quick background on that is when I was in Bashing the Code. Okay, he was in high school in Texas. I think he grew up in the Houston area, and I remember playing a show in Houston. And he comes up afterward. He goes, Mark Townsend? Yeah. He goes, I'm Mark Townsend. And he introduced himself.
Nice.
He's a high school kid.
Love it.
He came to Belmont, out of high school, went to Belmont. He's a sax player who played a bit of keyboards. I'm sorry. And and he had been around, and he worked mainly in like inspo circles. Israel Houghton, I think is how you pronounce his name, might have played with Cindy Morgan at one time, but he was like a CCM inspo guy.
Okay.
And he played keyboards on the solo tour, I think, for K-Max. Him and K-Max had a friendship. But yeah, it was funny because then I had met him at that point. And it was like, I had previously gone to using my full name, Mark Lee Townsend, as a producer, so that the royalty checks would end up with the right guy.
Right. Yeah.
Pure and simple. That's the only reason I ever went to using my full name. Because, and apparently I think he's back in Texas. Last I heard, he was playing in Osteen's church because it's a very well paid position in the worship team.
I'm
on it.
Sure.
Very well paid, like
So
a yearly
much money.
salary. And that was which would make sense because I said he's a Texan, and I think he moved back there. That's the last I heard.
Okay.
I haven't. But I always got along real well with him and stuff. Just different generation, and he did his thing, a different kind of music. He did his. He was into that type of stuff. Where I was into rock and roll.
So basically, Kevin just needed more Mark Townsend in his life.
Yeah, exactly.
He surrounded himself.
Exactly. I love K-Max. I always got along really well with him. Toby was always the one I was probably closest to of the three, but I've always got along with all of them, and Michael, we've always just been really good friends. And when they had the Virgin deal, we would do radio things where it was just the three guys, and then I'd play acoustic and sing the extra background vocal. And so we did like a little tour of that back in the day. So, but Toby is always the guy that I related to the most, probably because he was the guy he had kids when I had kids, you know what I mean?
Right.
Just we related to each other. And even from a ministry viewpoint, I've always been involved in circles that are very evangelistic, really believe in the gospel, and Toby does too. So I think that's another area where we were kind of kindred spirits.
Yeah.
Right.
So
okay, so
Nice.
now I'm gonna open it up to the other guys for real questions.
No problem.
No, it's good.
Okay.
If I could put in one more shameless plug of what I'm getting ready to do in 2025. One last shameless plug. Several years ago, I did a solo record called 1919. Okay. And basically it was a total vanity project. Teeson's on it. Matt Shelton.
Oh yeah. Everyone.
Davey Basinger's on it. Tim Skipper's on it. Ross Holmes, the fiddle player from Mumford and Sons. And like,
Nice.
I called in a bunch of my buddies, my friends, to sing and do little guest cameos and things on it. But it's a long, strange record. It's a timeline about the life of my dad. My dad was a World War II guy. He grew up in the Depression. His dad, my grandfather, was a bastard. He was a jerk. He was a hard man that was a drunk, cheated on my grandmother. It was really difficult on my dad. And I knew none of this until a few years before my dad passed away. I one afternoon, I put a micro cassette recorder down on a table and talked with my dad for 3 hours and did an interview and finally got him to talk about all this stuff a few years before he passed away. Wow. And I had no idea. And so the whole album is basically about my dad's life, from having a crap upbringing to being a World War II guy to dealing with my mom having poor health and dying at a very young age, to dealing with loss of jobs, just crap in life. And the constant was his faith in the Lord, so I'm fine. And then I released it right when COVID hit. I couldn't tour behind it because everything got shut down for a year and a half. So finally in 2025, I'm actually going to go out and tour behind 1919.
Oh, no way.
Sweet.
And so what I do, I basically use the tracks off the album, but I approached it in a different way. Most people, when they do tracks, are just pulling, 2-track, the instrumental masters, and it sounds all processed. It sounds karaoke. Right. I actually went back to my masters and my multi-tracks and redid it without putting the master compression and all this stuff on it. So it sounds more like I'm playing with a band. And I play banjo, I play uke, I play piano, I play guitar, play lead, I play different instruments. And I've got a screen behind. I got video, and it's all like tons. It's like a Ken Burns thing where there's loads of
Sweet.
family pictures, and it
Oh,
tells the whole
wow.
story, top
Very
to
cool.
bottom. And so I'm really going to focus on that in 2025. Going out and doing shows, probably a lot of churches, do some clubs where it's appropriate. But there's loads of people in churches too that have never really clearly heard the gospel. And the idea is basically like, God saved my dad from just a crap, awful life, and he could do the same thing for you. That's kind of the idea.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
That's awesome.
It's called 1919, The Ballad of Rexford. My dad's name was Rexford, and he was born in 1919. So that's where that came about.
That's
So cool.
amazing.
And it's a
I love
weird
it.
concept album. It has all the type of production stuff that I do on records. Of course, it's got all that, and the live string arrangements, and just all the quirky instruments. But it's all over the map. It's just, some of it's Shelton did. I do the song called "The Hardest Job," and it's about my grandfather struggling with being a hard factory worker and coming home and getting drunk and beating up my grandmother. And it's his struggle with it, and so it's a really hard edged song.
Right. Shelton. He's the
Shelton
perfect guy
shreds.
to do that.
He does ad libs on the outro while there's all these guitar noises going on, and he just does these ad libs, and he did it off the top of his head. I just threw it in record, said sing what you're feeling, and he just nailed it in one pass. And it's just him doing his laugh thing, that trademark thing he's got, and just ripping his voice to shreds, and it's really impressive. Thiessen sings on it. He sings the verses to the song called "The Church Meeting." It's about my dad got saved because they built a church 5 doors down from his house, and my grandfather decided that he carried a lot of guilt for being a turd in life, so he decided that the best way was to take the family to church. And it was just this tiny little church in Columbus, Ohio, on the south end. And that's where my dad actually came to know the Lord, at that point. But it's a song called "The Church Meeting." It's from the pastor's aspect of it. But Thiessen sings the verses on it, and he sounds absolutely great. It's really great, really heartfelt. It's that ballad voice of his, and it's a road trip record. It's an album that you put on if you're going someplace and you've got 50 minutes, that you need to blow. It'll take you. It'll take you on a journey. Like totally. The Who's Quadrophenia. Yeah. It's my version of the Who's Quadrophenia.
Oh,
is what it is.
Love that.
So that's my last shameless plug for the night.
Okay, awesome. That's a great plug.
So fire up a question if you got something
before
we close it up. So.
For MLT.
Yeah, it's going to be a good year.
Like it's going to be a big year. That's really exciting.
I'm excited. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't want to talk about anything else besides that at this point. That was such a good plug. I mean,
it's got the heart. It's got the heart in it too.
I know, Mark. You're so good at this. You're too good at this.
I have one question that I'd like to get in there that I think actually relates to everything that you just shared.
Okay, go for it.
What would you share with folks kind of as a takeaway that has meant a lot to you or that you found true in your journey as a songwriter, right? So we've talked a lot about you as a producer, but I'm kind of more of a songwriter nerd just surely because I have a little less production knowledge, to be honest. Yeah. But I see some serious songwriting chops in you as well that may take the back burner or the back seat. So
it has for years.
Production
that was a choice.
Skills.
Yeah, that was a choice.
But I'd love to just like shine a spotlight on Mark the songwriter and hear from you whatever you'd like to share because I'm here to absorb all of that wisdom and maybe even relate it back to the process of this record that you're talking about.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I started writing songs at a real early age. It's funny. I recently found a cassette. This is hilarious. I think it was my 12th birthday. I think it was. My parents, who didn't have a bunch of money at all, bought me a cassette recorder. The kind that you see, that had it's mono and it's got the mic on the top and the buttons and stuff. They bought that for my birthday. And I actually found a cassette from that. And what I used to do, I had this old acoustic that was just a cheap import acoustic called a FAME, F-A-M-E, stood for Federation of American Music Educators. Apparently they bought loads of them, and schools used to offer a guitar class, like some high or like high schools or whatever. And so it was a cheap Martin knockoff. But my parents bought that for me in third grade, and I had that guitar for years. And I found this tape where I had set the recorder on my bed, and I wrote these cheesy little songs, and they were just cheesy, like singer-songwritery stuff from the 70s. I mean, what do you know at 12 years old? About anything, it's just silly stuff. But of course, because you set the recorder on the bed, it's closer to the guitar than it is to your voice, right?
Yeah.
So when I listened to this cassette and I found it, and I had not listened to it in 40 some years, and I'm listening to this, and I dropped it into Logic to preserve it just because it was fast. I'm a Pro Tools guy, but I also have Logic. I have Cubase Pro, and just because I mix things for people, and if they send it in on Logic, I'll stay in Logic. If they send it in on Cubase or Nuendo, I'll stay in that. Pro Tools, same thing. Okay, but I threw it into Logic, and Logic, the newest version of Logic, has AI in it. Okay, it does stem splitting in it. So I got this mono recording. I split the vocal away from the acoustic,
isolated it,
and rebalanced it so the guitar was in the right place on the mix. So the vocal was at a proper, and then I reprinted it. And I sat back and I go, never in a million years as a 12-year-old kid did I ever think that I'd be able to do something like that, and then listen to it at my age.
Right.
And it just,
my God.
It's just mind blowing. And you got to understand, this is, a computer. Nobody had a computer back then. I mean, it didn't exist. It's just a whole different world. So, but even back then, I was writing just nice. It sounded like Neil Diamond or Carole King. They were just simple little songs, and I sounded like a 5-year-old singing it. My voice had not changed at all. But that was kind of a start. I've always written things, and I wrote things in the context of bands. Always did it in bands. I wrote the bulk of the Zilch Platinum record. I mean, that was just kind of one of my things overall. I actually have a co-write on a Kelly Clarkson record. I co-wrote a song with her. I did a track and she built a song around it. It's called Cry. It's off of All I Ever Wanted or something, I think was the name of the record back in the day. But for some reason, and even when I'd help bands out a little bit and guide them with writing, I never took writing credit. And I think part of it's a bad habit because Todd Rundgren did the same thing. He figured it was part of his production that he was doing. Most people don't feel that way. If they write something, they want it, and they want to get in on it. And it's all worked out in the end. But as a writer, like you said, it has to be about heart. The thing that's most frustrating to me, and I sound like the guy that says, hey, you kids, get off my lawn, I mean, get out of my yard. I don't want to be that. But when I listen to so much of what pop music is, it's either just a beat with some kind of sub bass going and just stupid lyrics and with a bunch of effects. Yeah, there's no meat to it at all.
Everything is like 75 BPM.
And it's all the same 4 chords.
Yes, Mark, you're talking my language.
If you talk the number system, it's 1, 1 5 6 minor 4.
Yes, exactly.
And it drives me nuts.
Me
and
too.
Of course, there's stuff out there every now and then. What I like doing is going back and finding things and guitars are missing. So much of it's all. Everybody bought Logic, and they're just messing with beats and keys,
programming synth,
and programming stuff, and then they just throw a vocal over it with a Focusrite interface. It's okay. Some people can make very clever music that way, but unfortunately, too many people go for the low hanging fruit, and they just don't. It's all production and no writing. But occasionally, I saw some movie on Netflix not too long ago, and I can't recommend it because it's got a lot of language in it. I wouldn't watch it again. But it had this soundtrack done by this guy out of New Jersey. He had a band called Real Estate.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What is the guy's name? I can't remember, but he's the main singer. But it's hip. It's like if you took 60s 12-string and emo, like chimey happy guitars, and like a garage band recording. It's all real happy, fun stuff, and they got a lot of slap delay on it.
Mm-hmm.
The first album, it's got a song on it. The opening cut's called Beachcomber, and it just makes you feel good. It's just kind of got this happy, organic, fun thing. And when I listen to things like that, even though it's maybe 7-8 years old, it still is just really enjoyable to listen, and it's inspiring. And you could play that now and bring it up now, and it would still be relevant because it's so uniquely fun, you know. But as a writer, I said, like, no rules. I mean, with the Clarkson thing, I did something that was pretty low hanging fruit. I mean, it followed in the progressions. I tried to do stuff. I wish I'd have been able to produce it. Howard Benson produced it, and once again, he's awesome. But it would have been fun to really actually see my demo through and actually do the actual cut on it. But write some things for that. Rundgren taught me that you could write all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. When he first came out, everybody pinned him as the male Carole King.
Right.
His influences were Carole King, Laura Nyro, who was a really clever writer in the 1960s and early 70s. And of course, Beatles. He had, he loved Lennon and McCartney, of course. But then he ended up doing his own stuff with it. I highly recommend somebody who's listening to this, check out some of, just kind of an overview of some of his work. But then he gets into some crazy, weird, almost Frank Zappa level demanding. It's almost like you have to really work to listen to it.
Yeah.
Yep.
But Mark,
I'll listen to that to shake things up.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah.
Listen to me right now.
Yes.
For guys that make music that are our age, you are our Todd Rundgren.
Todd.
Okay.
You're the Todd.
So just take
and
that,
I don't write
accept
like him,
it.
So.
Hey.
It's the philosophy.
No pushback is needed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can see, based on our conversation, I can see the direct line of him being an influence for you.
The creativity, the open doors. I don't write his progressions. I don't.
Well, no, but
he opened that door.
The sensibilities, exactly.
The sensibility. You have opened that up for a lot of people, specifically, I think within our age group and people that are specifically music nerds.
Yeah, a lot of our listenership for sure.
Yes, exactly. We so appreciate everything from I'm pretty sure I've seen you play with DC Talk live.
Probably those were huge tours.
Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure I saw that, and from that to Jennifer Knapp to Zilch to early Relient K and beyond, and then everything with Brave New World, all of the wedding, Deus Veil, all of that stuff.
I've been so blessed.
Dude, you have been a massive influence on. Yeah, it may be a relatively small group of people, but
it's a small group, but I'm grateful.
But we are here for you, man.
You for those people, you're a pillar. You're an icon,
100%. You have been a monument within the things that are influential to us. So,
well, thank you very kindly. I appreciate it.
What's great about that? Yeah, and what I love is you're just a normal dude, Mark. I just, it's the best that we can just
all I know how to
talk
be.
Shop with you and
exactly.
hear some awesome stories and just mix it up. It's the best, man. We're really grateful.
It's too easy in the business. It's too easy in the business to buy your own hype and be full of crap. I mean, it just is. And
for sure.
Yeah.
It's the old adage, the ssame people that you step on the way up are going to be there looking down on you on the way down. McCartney and Ringo are two of the most gracious, down to earth people, and you're talking icons.
Yeah,
you're talking icons.
I know, that's why it
there's no excuse for being a jerk. There really isn't. You know
exactly.
Which is why I've tried to couch all of this in, because I understand your perspective. I understand it. It's hard to take a compliment. So
because I know who I am and I know the real me. Yes, it's like I know my failures very well.
Right, no,
for sure.
The warts and all,
Yeah, but that's what makes it actually really refreshing.
Yeah,
is that you're not trying to hide behind some plastic version of yourself.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know how that works.
Yeah, and I think legally we do have to say that Mark Lee Townsend paid $2,500 for this interview and for all of the nice things that we've said.
Yes.
We just have to cover our bases legally, but beyond that, Mark, you are incredible. No.
It's still less than the $1 million that Oprah got paid to represent Harris.
Yeah. No, we're
and I'm
joking about that. That's not a political statement.
We're all just having a good time.
Yeah.
Okay. I do think we have to wrap it up.
Yep. All good.
Thank you so much, Mark, for being on this show.
No, more than grateful to be able to share stuff with you. And as I said, if I could leave anything with everybody, not to be cliche, but the one underlying factor in all of it is a belief that God does care about me, that there's a future there, and not only in the afterlife, but on this earth. And I'm a firm believer that things happen the way they're supposed to happen, especially following God, and there's a piece that comes from that. And I've been very, very blessed to have worked with people. Some of those people are not walking with the Lord these days. That's not, I can pray for them. It's not a litmus test or anything like that. I want them to have that peace and that joy again. And I pray for people like that, but also, as I said, just for your listeners, from the time I was a little kid, man, that's been a constant. It just, I've seen God lead me through great times and terrible times. I mean, just brutal stuff. And I've always been able to share with my kids and my family, there is a future. God loves you. He forgives you. You have a future. There's nothing you can do to ruin a relationship with. There's no unpardonable sin other than just going, never knowing him,
right.
And you've got a lifetime to discover that, so that all, praise God from whom all blessings flow, if I can say that, you know what I mean? That's that's been a perspective in my life, and I'd like to share that. And once again, for what it's worth.
I love that,
man.
Love it so much.
Thanks, Mark.
Mark, thank you so much for being on the show.
Parade wave.
Parade wave.
Oh, there you go. Okay,
everybody get your
listen closely, jammers. Maybe you'll hear the air flowing past our hands
for our parade wave.
If you enjoyed this, we have more nonsense like it at our Patreon at patreon.com/ChurchHymnsNow podcast. And of course, from all of us here at the Church Hymns Now crew, may all your favorite bands stay together, and peace out, Mon Frères.